Chapter 40:18. Mother. Prince Mo immediately snuggled up to his mother's side and said with a pitiful expression, "Mother, don't be sad. If father doesn't want us, your son will take you out of the palace to live." The little crown princess also nodded and added, "Our family is rich." Mo Luxing looked up at the sky speechlessly. Looking at the three people in front of him, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and the corners of his mouth twitched. This perfect act of singing and acting really did look like she had suffered a great grievance. Empress Dowager Qin was already angered to the point of vomiting blood by Prince Mo and the little crown princess. Now that she saw the Empress' protective behavior, she was even angrier to the point of trembling. She slapped the armrest and said sternly, "Your Majesty. Just let them do as they please." The Emperor looked innocent and pitiful. "What can we do? Now that Jin's wife is here, Jin has no other choice but to compromise." Empress Dowager Qin looked at the Emperor's innocent face and couldn't help but get angry. She pointed at the Emperor and said with trembling fingers, You. This Empress has been in a coma for more than 10 years. It seems that many people have forgotten what kind of person this Empress was in the past. Bai Wuxia lightly interrupted Empress Dowager Qin's words and glanced at her. "Empress Dowager, this Empress seems to remember that I seem to have told you 20 years ago. Don't meddle in our husband and wife matters, right?" Empress Dowager Qin's eyelids twitched and she clenched her fingers in anger. What do you mean? Why have you been like this for decades?" Bai Wuxia's eyes turned completely cold as he stared at Empress Dowager Qin. "In the past, you tormented me, and now you're tormenting the crown princess. When have you ever not tormented her?" "I tormented her." Empress Dowager Qin was so angry that she almost spat out a mouthful of blood. She pointed at the little crown princess's direction with trembling fingers and said with trembling lips, She. Do you think I can do whatever I want to him?" Prince Mo hurriedly took the little crown princess, who was sitting obediently on the side, into his arms and patted her back to comfort her. He turned to Empress Dowager Qin and said, "Empress Dowager, my wife is still young. Don't scare her with your ferocious expression." The corner of Mo Luxing's mouth twitched, and the corner of his eyes twitched. He could see what kind of show these two black-hearted people were putting on today. They were pretending to be weak and pitiful in front of their mother. If these two were not his son and daughter-in-law, he would definitely slap them to death. The Emperor turned to look at Empress Dowager Qin, whose veins were bulging, and silently mourned for her in his heart. Empress Dowager Qin was trembling with anger. "Bai Wuxia, get it straight. I didn't do anything to them today. It was the two of them who killed several old people in my palace. Damn it. If they still had the slightest bit of respect for their grandmother, they definitely wouldn't have done such a heartless and cruel thing. You're forcing me to my death." Empress Dowager Qin was so angry that she beat her chest and wailed, "If your Majesty feels that there's no need for this old body to exist, then drive me to the cold palace. Whoa. What's the point of this old body living like this?" Mo Luxing's eyelids twitched and he was about to stop her. Bai Wuxia said coldly, "Since the Empress Dowager wants to go to the cold palace, then let her." Empress Dowager Qin was dumbfounded. Princess Yan Yun on the side was also dumbfounded. What? Empress Dowager Qin opened her mouth wide and couldn't close it for a long time. Chapter 40:19. Was she really going to drive her to the cold palace? Empress Dowager Qin's eyes widened in disbelief. Mo Luxing's face also revealed a bit of awkwardness. Was the Empress Dowager looking for trouble? It was really as Wuxia said. After more than 10 years, the Empress Dowager had long forgotten what kind of temper Wuxia had. What a joke! Cough. Wuxia's temper was so bad that the entire court didn't dare to provoke her back then, let alone a small harem. Wuxia. Mo Lushing saw that the old lady was a bit pitiful and couldn't help but want to plead for the old lady in front of his wife. In the end, his wife glared at him, and he was a bit speechless. The emperor, who had obediently shut his mouth, suddenly realized that his wife might settle accounts with him in the future. He might not even be able to protect himself. "Someone come!" Bai Wuxia called out impatiently, "Invite the old lady to the cold flower palace and settle her down." The old lady was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She pointed at Bai Wuxia and said, "You for a long time," but couldn't spit out a word. "Your Majesty. You saw how the Empress treated me so heartlessly, and you didn't say anything." Empress Dowager Qin cried out. Mo Lian and Arbor sat side by side and couldn't help but roll their eyes at the same time. Was there something wrong with her? She was clearly the one who asked to go to the cold palace to live out her days. Why did she blame Mother Empress for being heartless and cold now? No matter how she handled it, it wouldn't end well. Grand Concubine Fong has arrived. Just as they were talking, another announcement came from outside. The Emperor and Empress looked up at the same time and saw a kind-looking old woman walk in and say to them with a smile, "Your Majesty, Empress, this old one is presumptuous." Bai Wuxia's expression softened slightly, and she stood up with a smile. "Grand Concubine, please sit." Grand Concubine Fong sighed and sat down. She raised her hand to pat the sobbing Empress Dowager Qin. "Sister, His Majesty has many things to do. We really shouldn't make such a fuss over such a small matter." "Empress, it's indeed not appropriate for the Empress Dowager to go to a place like the Cold Palace." Grand Concubine Fong continued, "The Empress Dowager is old, please treat her leniently for the sake of the late Emperor." Bai Wuxia smiled more and more warmly and sweetly. "Old princess, you don't know." The suggestion of going to the Cold Palace was made by the Empress Dowager herself. She said with an aggrieved expression, "Since the Empress Dowager has said so, as a junior, this consort can only comply." Empress Dowager Qin gritted her teeth, "Shameless. Why don't you comply with other things? Are you here to be respectful to your elders or to stir up trouble? Whenever you want to obey, whenever you want to disobey, whenever you want to disobey, you disobey. Empress Dowager, you want to go to the Cold Palace and then regret it?" Bai Wuxia glanced at her sarcastically. Old Concubine Fong hurriedly smiled to smooth things over. "Empress." Old Concubine Fong took Bai Wuxia's hand with a smile and patted it gently. "What happened today was probably just a misunderstanding. My sister's people were disobedient and trespassed into the Crown Prince's bedchamber. They deserve to die. Empress Dowager, she was just blinded by those wicked servants for a while." Old Concubine Fong looked back at Empress Dowager Qin. The latter's face stiffened. Although he felt depressed, he didn't dare to say anything else. After all, the Empress's words had almost sent her to the Cold Palace. Ah. Bai Wuxia looked unhappy. He smiled coldly and looked at Old Concubine Fong, saying, "What if this consort insists on inviting the Empress Dowager to the Cold Palace?" Chapter 40-20. Old Concubine Fong's eyes moved, and she hurriedly reached out to stop the Empress Dowager who was about to jump up. She shook her head with a smile. "Wuxia, you won't." The Empress smiled very gently. "I didn't care about the Empress Dowager in the past, not because I had a good temper, but because I was too lazy to care about her." Old Concubine Fong's benevolent face almost fell what the Empress said. It was like slapping the Empress Dowager's face with a backhand. But it's different now. The Empress looked with a smile at the old lady whose face was dark and stiff, and said with a smile, "I have to protect my son and daughter-in-law now, and I have to protect my grandchildren in the future. I can't always let some random people step on my son and daughter-in-law's heads. His Majesty has a good temper and doesn't want to care about the old lady." The Empress's face darkened, and she said coldly, Empress Dowager, what kind of temper do I have? Shouldn't you think about it? Empress Dowager Chen's face turned green, black, and white in a flash. It didn't take long for her face to change a few colors. Old concubine Fang's face was also a bit twisted. She forced a smile and said, Sister Empress Dowager is old. She will think about it more, and she will remember it. Think about it. Think about what? Think about how she was defeated by the Empress in the past. Empress Dowager Chen's face was very ugly. She didn't want to stay here and make a fool of herself anymore. She stood up and waved her hand, saying with a sneer, the Empress insists on protecting her, and I have no other choice. In this case, I can only go to Mount Heaven Saint to worship the former emperor and let him judge for me. Old concubine Fang's face stiffened. She really wanted to slap this brainless old sister's face. She finally persuaded the Empress and didn't hesitate to put down her old face and smile. In the end, it was all ruined by this old woman's words. As expected, the Empress's face darkened. She raised her hand and shouted, Tian Sha. A black shadow suddenly landed in the study, bowed, and didn't say anything. In this case, you lead the people and let the deputy commander of the Imperial Army accompany you. Send the Empress Dowager to Mount Heaven Saint to fast and pray for the former emperor. You don't have to come back for at least 2 to 3 months. After all, praying for blessings for 1, 2, 3, or 5 days is useless. Yes, Your Majesty. The shadow guard named Tian Sha responded coldly and turned to look at the dumbfounded Empress Dowager. Your Highness, please. Empress Dowager Qin almost spat out a mouthful of poisonous blood. Her finger trembled as she pointed at the Empress, you. She looked anxiously at the Emperor. Unexpectedly, the Emperor had already pretended to sit back down beside the table. He picked up a booklet from the side and flipped it upside down in front of his eyes, reading with great interest. Humph. He knew that the Emperor had no right to speak in front of his wife. The Empress Dowager flew into a rage. She flicked her sleeves and walked out unwillingly. The Empress stood up and said, respectfully sending off the Empress Dowager. The veins on Empress Dowager Chen's face bulged. Consort Dowager Fang looked at them speechlessly, sighed, and said with a smile, then this old one will go back first. Old Imperial concubine, take care. Consort Dowager Fang sighed again. Before she walked out, she looked at Arbor's face. The little girl had a very obedient expression. She sat beside Prince Mo and didn't say anything, watching the show from beginning to end. Chapter 40-21. After the 2 old ladies left, the servants silently closed the door to the imperial study, leaving the family of 4 to stare at each other. Mo Liuxing's face was stern as he suddenly slammed the table. Mo Lien. Father summoned you for questioning. You're good, you made the first move and brought your mother here. This son of a fraud, the more he looked at him, the more he wanted to grab him and beat him up. Without waiting for Prince Mo to speak, Bai Wuxia looked at her husband with dissatisfaction. Why are you yelling at our son? Prince Mo very cooperatively threw himself behind his mother and pitifully called out, Mother. Empress Bai's heart was about to melt from her son's call. She angrily glared at the emperor. It was clearly that old woman who schemed against them. Why are you yelling at him? Mo Liuxing couldn't help but want to laugh bitterly. He hurriedly walked over and tugged at his wife's small hand. Wuxia, I was just talking to little glutinous dumpling. This child, he didn't know how to control his strength. He killed a few old people by the Empress Dowager's side. Bai Wuxia snorted and glanced at him with dissatisfaction. If they weren't looking for death, why would my son lower himself to their level? Emperor! Exclamation point. What you said makes sense, but you don't know the fraud of our lives. Bai Wuxia pulled Mo Lien and Arbor's hands and said angrily, I didn't know that my son's life was so difficult. Even a random dog slave could barge into their sleeping quarters. The old lady can casually scold them. We can't live like this. The young couple nodded in agreement. Their obedient appearance made the emperor grind his teeth in anger. Wife, you've been bewitched by these two little bastards. They're not like what you're saying. You didn't see the scene of these two bastards climbing up the roof and demanding debts. Even he, the emperor, had been cheated by them several times. With their pure evil nature, how could they be bullied by others? Not taking the initiative to bully others was already very righteous. Little glutinous dumpling, Jojo, pack your things and follow mother back to Glory City. It's not comfortable to live in the palace. Let's go home with your grandfather. Bai Wuxia hugged her son and pretended to cry. Your father doesn't love the three of us. We still have Grandpa. The emperor's handsome face was bitter. He hurriedly pulled his son away and tossed him to the other side of Arbor. He hugged his wife and hurriedly said, all right, all right, all right. Your husband will send someone to send the Empress Dowager to Mount Heaven Saint. He hugged his wife and patted her. Then, he turned around and glared at the two of them. The look in his eyes was blatant. Why aren't you getting lost? Mo Lien pursed his lips and reached out to take his wife's small hand, leading her out of the imperial study. The two of them circled around the room and came to the window at the back of the imperial study. At the same time, they crouched there and looked inside. From where they were, they could clearly see their father's deflated face. The two of them looked at each other silently, covering their mouths as they laughed. Who told you to find fault with us? Now you've kicked an iron plate. Bai Wuxia said angrily, you've been living a carefree life while I wasn't here. How could that be? Mo Luxing hurriedly said. It's not carefree at all. I heard that there are many women like Princess Yen Yun hidden in His Majesty's back garden. Nonsense. Mo Luxing hurriedly denied. I don't know any of them. Bai Wuxia snorted. I also heard that the Empress Dowager wants to marry you, a concubine. Chapter 40-22. Wife. Mo Luxing hurriedly begged for mercy with a pitiful expression. I don't recognize any of the things you said above. All these years, I've lived a life that's even more austere than a monk's. If you don't believe me, you can ask Lai Fu. Mo Luxing said aggrievedly, Wife, I've waited for you for more than 10 years. My loyalty to you is as clear as the sun and the moon. I've waited bitterly for you. Half of my hair has turned white. Bai Wuxia glanced at his gorgeous long black hair and rolled her eyes at him. Looking at his bitter expression, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. In fact, how could she not know the emperor's feelings for her? She was just putting on an act just now, but when she saw the old woman holding Princess Yen Yun's hand in the imperial study, it really made her feel a little uncomfortable. The old woman looked at Princess Yen Yun like a mother-in-law looking at her daughter-in-law. It really made her feel nauseous. She didn't know how many beautiful girls the old woman had introduced to her husband while she was unconscious. Fortunately, her husband was upright and wasn't afraid of slanted shadows. Otherwise, who knew how many good sisters would pop out of her family after all these years? The Empress panicked at the thought of these good sisters. The old woman's actions today were simply too irksome. Bai Wuxia looked up at the Emperor. What do you plan to do with those princesses? Mo Luxing saw that his wife was angry and immediately said without blinking, sell them all. Bai Wuxia was speechless. He pulled out his hand and hit him. Sell what? Did he think that those people were just some maidservants who could be casually sold just like that? If they were really sold, who knew how those monarchs would come and make a fuss? Bai Wuxia smiled faintly. What do you think about adding a few more people to Jianping Mansion? The emperor's mouth twitched. Wife, why can't the grudges between you and Giant Pain be smoothed out after more than 10 years? On the surface, the emperor naturally nodded happily. Good, good. Giant Pain Mansion will be lively with more people. Bai Wuxia nodded in satisfaction. Arbor leaned over to Mo Lian's ear and whispered, Hubby, Mother is so powerful. Mo Lian nodded. Jojo, we'll have a good life in the future. Then, let's not deal with the old lady in the future, Mo Lian said in a low voice. Leave it to Mother. She can scold the old lady until she starts to doubt her life. Brat, when did you learn to squat in the corner? At the emperor's bellow, Crown Prince Mo hastily scooped up his wife and ran off like a wisp of smoke. My Joe's section break, wallalala, splatter. The sound of debris falling to the ground echoed inside and outside Empress Lu's bedroom. How is it possible that we can't find anything? Trash. Trash. A bunch of trash. Empress Lu scolded angrily, her eyes red. The palace maids who were prostrating on the ground had long turned pale. They lowered their heads and didn't dare to raise their heads. The fourth prince hasn't stepped out of his room for the past few days. We can't see anything unusual. Impossible. Empress Lu sharply interrupted the secret guard who was reporting. Go and investigate again. We must find something that can be used against him. I will personally present it to His Majesty and let him see what his good son has done. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. The eunuch's sharp voice sounded. Something bad has happened. Something happened to the crown prince. Empress Lu's expression changed. Chapter 40-23. That eunuch rolled in front of Empress Lu and cried, Your Majesty, please calm down. Your Majesty, please calm down. What exactly happened to the crown prince? Empress Lu was so concerned that she didn't notice the faint dark light that flashed through the old eunuch's eyes. The old eunuch lowered his head and said in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, this servant heard that His Highness the Crown Prince snuck out of the palace tonight and went to Huachu House. Empress Lu was stunned and then asked sternly, Where is it? What Huachu Hall? One could tell that it wasn't anything good from the sound of it. The old eunuch lowered his head and cried, It's a brothel. What? Empress Lu widened her eyes in horror. The crown prince went to visit a brothel, and now even the old eunuch beside her knew about it. What did that mean? It meant that the crown prince's matter couldn't be hidden anymore, okay? That wasn't the end of it. The old eunuch lowered his head and said in a low voice, His Highness the Crown Prince got jealous over a woman and got into a fight with a patron of the brothel. In the end, he lost and was carried back to the palace with his head covered in blood. I heard that he even made a fuss about ransoming a prostitute in the brothel. Now the whole court knows about it. Empress Lu's body went limp and she collapsed to the ground. That eunuch cried and crawled to the Empress's side and said sorrowfully, Your Majesty, take care of your body. Don't worry. Perhaps the source of this news is wrong. Empress Lu struggled to get up and screamed, There must be a mistake. It must be a rumor spread by someone else. How could my Li do that? She knew her son very well. He was a very clean and honest person. All these years, Empress Lu had been looking for a suitable candidate for her son who could help him secure his position as the heir apparent. Her son's brain must have been caught by a door. Why would he go to that brothel and get jealous over a woman? It must be a rumor, a rumor, a rumor. Empress Lu was so angry that she clutched her chest and screamed, It's Old Fourth. It must be that Old Fourth who did this. I want to see His Majesty. I want to see His Majesty. Look at that good son of his, all day long, he's up to no good. When Empress Lu rushed to the door of the hall, she was immediately stopped by someone. "Empress, His Majesty has ordered you to be grounded for a month." A sharp light appeared in Empress Lu's eyes. "Get out of my way. I want to see His Majesty." "I'm sorry, Nyang Nyang. We are under His Majesty's order to guard Rinchuan Palace. Before His Majesty gives the order to lift the seal, Nyang Nyang cannot take half a step out of Rinchuan Palace." Empress Lu, ah. With a shriek, she pulled her messy long hair and looked at the two guards at the palace gate as if she was looking at a dead person. She said word by word, "Both of you, just you wait." The old eunuch followed behind Empress Lu with his head down, a mocking smile on his lips. Her Highness really can't see the situation clearly. What was she waiting for? Her mother's family had already collapsed, and not a single member of her family was left. Did she think that she still had a chance to make a comeback? Hee, don't joke around. Empress Lu couldn't leave Rinchuan Palace. She could only pace back and forth in this huge palace. She had already smashed all the furnishings in the palace into smithereens. At this moment, the floor was full of debris, and several junior palace maids were lying on the ground cleaning up. Chapter 40-24. Empress Lu paced back and forth in the palace, and her eyes turned cold. What is fourth prince doing now? The old eunuch lowered his head and said in a low voice, "His Highness has been sent to Fengyang City by His Majesty to negotiate with the Shenzhou army." Why him? She had heard that the Shenzhou army stationed 1,000,000 soldiers in the border village of Fengyang City. Even if His Majesty was unwell, he shouldn't have sent fourth prince for such an important matter. The old eunuch lowered his eyes and said softly, "It is said that His Majesty originally wanted to send His Highness the Crown Prince to deal with this matter. But now His Highness made a big fuss because of a prostitute in the Huachu Club, and his reputation is really bad." Empress Lu covered her chest and looked like she was going to faint again. Impossible. How could her become like this for no reason? The old eunuch continued, "Besides, the commander of the Shenzhou army specifically asked His Highness the Fourth Prince to discuss this matter. For this reason, His Majesty has given His Highness the transfer of 700,000 fierce tiger soldiers to His Highness." Empress Lu widened her eyes in disbelief. "No, that's impossible. Impossible." The old eunuch lowered his eyes and sighed. "It is a foregone conclusion." Empress Lu smashed the things around her, and then she was stunned when her hand touched the air. It turned out that there was nothing left to smash in her bedchamber. The old eunuch lowered his eyes and looked submissive, but secretly he curled his lips in sarcasm. What Empress of the Central Palace? She was like a lunatic. No wonder His Majesty disliked her more and more. When she encountered some things, she could only smash and smash. She had no other choice. As he was thinking, the Empress said sharply, "Secret guards." The old eunuch's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately looked up to dissuade her. "Your Highness, if you let the secret guards take you out now, you will only anger heaven more. If I continue to be locked in this palace, I won't even know if the outside world changes." "Your Highness, please be careful with your words," the old eunuch said hurriedly. "I can't be careful," Empress Lu screamed. "Secret guards, secret guards." Two secret guards in black immediately flashed in through the window and saluted with hands folded. "Your Highness." To the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. She wanted to go to her son's place and see what was going on. A moment later, the two guards at the gate of Enchanting Palace fell in a pool of blood. Under the protection of the secret guards, the Empress hurried to the Crown Prince's Eastern Palace. Before she reached the bedroom, she heard a burst of laughter from outside the door. The Empress was so angry that her eyes turned red when she heard the voices of these wild bees and butterflies. She ordered someone to kick open the door of the Eastern Palace. The scene of wine and meat in front of her made her tremble with anger. In just a few days, the Crown Prince had actually dug out a large pond in his bedroom. More than a dozen half-dressed young girls were sitting around Crown Prince Rollercoasters. Some of them were delivering wine, while others were pinching fruits. Many pairs of seductive eyes followed the sound and glanced over. "Get out, all of you!" Empress Lu's sharp voice resounded throughout the Eastern Palace. The men and women who were indulging in their passion all trembled in fear. "It's Mother Empress!" Crown Prince Rollercoasters leaned against the soft bodies of the two women like a spineless shrimp. He raised his hand and toasted Empress Lu, who was standing above the pool with an inexplicable expression. Chapter 40-25. Empress Lu's entire body trembles with anger. She points at Crown Prince Rollercoasters, who is slumped on top of a woman, and says in a stern voice, "You! Look at what you've become. Get out here right now." Rollercoasters frowns, revealing a regretful expression. "Mother, look at what you're saying. What's wrong with air? Air, this is what it means to truly enjoy life." The little eunuch who delivered the wine and fruits to the Crown Prince walks over from the door with his head lowered. Empress Lu's anger turns to hatred, and she sends the eunuch flying with a slap. The fruits on the plate are scattered all over the floor. Rollercoasters hurriedly stands up from the pool. Empress Lu then awkwardly discovers that besides a dozen beautiful women, there are two slender men with very good looks beside her son. Empress Lu is stunned on the spot. Could it be that her son has now become bisexual? She staggers and is about to fall to the ground. The two eunuchs hurriedly come forward to support her. Empress Lu angrily brushes away the two eunuchs' hands and says sternly, You, how did you become like this? You're actually willing to degrade yourself like this?" Rollercoasters' expression is displeased. Just as he is about to speak, he can't stop coughing violently. Empress Lu hurriedly steps forward again, calling the Crown Prince over and over again. "Crown Prince, don't be so unrestrained." Empress Lu advises earnestly, "Your body has always been weak, and you've always paid great attention to taking care of your body. How can you become like this now, unrestrained?" "Things are different now, Mother," Rollercoasters says impatiently. "Now, Imperial Father has one foot in the coffin. Do I still need to be so cautious? I'm the Crown Prince, second only to one person and above tens of thousands." He straightens his back and says disapprovingly, "I can do whatever I want. Who can control me? Crown Prince." Empress Lu is anxious and angry. She wants nothing more than to knock open her son's head and see for herself if his brain is filled with paste. Why is he suddenly behaving in such a disorderly manner? Do you know how many people in the imperial court are impeaching you because of your unrestrained behavior? Who dares to impeach this Crown Prince? Rollercoasters shouted angrily, "Mother, tell me, which old man is impeaching me behind my back? I'm going to kill these old slaves right now." "You!" Empress Lu was so angry at her son that her heart ached. She grabbed her clothes and gasped for breath. "Son! Even at such an important moment like this, you can't make a single mistake. Do you think your father has no other sons? Second brother and third brother are eyeing your position. And that despicable fourth brother, your maternal grandfather's family was killed by him. You don't think about how to take revenge for your grandfather. Instead, you spend your days in a drunken stupor, hanging out with these sluts." Empress Lu burst into tears. She grabbed her son's sleeve tightly and tried her best to persuade him. "You've hurt my heart too much." However, Rollercoasters looked extremely impatient. He shook off his mother's hand and said, all right, stop talking. Isn't it annoying to talk about you by my ear all day long? Don't worry. Once I ascend the throne, you'll be the Empress Dowager with incomparable honor and wealth. Naturally, you'll have endless enjoyment in the future. Chapter 40-26. Oh. You're so confident. A cold voice suddenly came from the door. The mother and son were stunned. They both turned their heads and met the Zhangzhou Emperor's cold eyes. Those eyes were so cold and merciless that anyone who saw them would feel fear. Empress Lu's heart trembled. She hurriedly knelt down and cried out, "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince is drunk. He was just talking nonsense. You can't take it seriously." "Mother, it's too far-fetched to say that." The second prince stood at the door and said with a smile, "I think the Crown Prince's royal brother is very sober. I didn't expect that. I'm not dead yet, but the Crown Prince can't wait to ascend the throne." "No, it's not like that, Your Majesty." Empress Lu knelt down and kowtowed. "The Crown Prince is talking nonsense after he's drunk. You can't take it seriously. I think he's speaking the truth after he's drunk." The Zhangzhou Emperor angrily rebuked. His cold eyes fell on the Crown Prince, who looked like a quail. Rongli shrunk his neck and pretended to be a coward. When he saw the Emperor's sharp eyes, he immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed again and again. "Father, please forgive me. Father, please spare my life. I spoke nonsense after drinking. Please forgive me." "Ha!" The Zhangzhou Emperor sneered. His hesitant eyes swept over him. Then his eyes fell on the men and women in messy clothes kneeling and trembling on the ground. "Rongli, since you won't be the Crown Prince, then I'll make the decision and order you to be deposed." A trace of pride flashed in the second prince's eyes. His hard work was not in vain. As soon as he received the news that the Empress was kicked out of the palace, he led the Emperor to watch such a good show. This big brother has been too helpful recently. He didn't know if he was controlled by something, but his temperament changed so much that he was floating. There were so many impeachment memorials in the imperial court, and this big brother did so many stupid things. Finally, he got himself removed. Looking at Rongli sitting on the ground with a dazed expression, the second prince couldn't help but stifle his laughter. The Emperor glanced at him and frowned. He turned to the Empress and said, "I'll ground you for 3 months. You came out today. In that case, you'll be grounded for another year." Your Majesty, you can't do this." Empress Lu finally reacted. She scrambled over and grabbed the Emperor's clothes. She cried and begged, "Your Majesty, you can't just cripple Li Er like this." Li Er was just confused for a moment. He will change. As she spoke, Empress Lu reached out and pressed the Crown Prince's head to kowtow. Rongli put on an act and said in a tearful voice, "Father, please have mercy. I know I was wrong. I will be a good person in the future. I won't dare to, we have made up our mind." Zhangzhou's emperor kicked away his son, who was so disgusting no matter how he looked at him. He flicked his sleeves and said, "Just wait for the decree." Empress Lu collapsed to the ground with a broken heart. Looking at the emperor who left with the second prince without looking back, she couldn't help but burst into tears. It's over, it's all over. Her broken vision finally focused on the 2 delicate-looking men behind the crown prince, Rongli. She suddenly pulled out the long sword hanging on the wall and slashed at them like a maniac. "I'll kill you bitches. It's you're the ones who instigated my son to be bad. Your Highness the Crown Prince." The 2 handsome men sobbed and threw themselves into Rongli's arms. Rongli. Chapter 40-27. Empress Lu's eyes were practically spitting out poisonous light. Holding the sword in her hand, she slashed at the two handsome men in a disorderly manner. The two men tightly clutched Rongli's lapels and sobbed, "Your Highness the Crown Prince." Rongli couldn't help but tremble all over. He hurriedly stood in front of the two men and shouted at the lunging Empress Lu, "Mother Empress, don't mess around. The two of them are my lovers. They are people I wholeheartedly want to protect. You can't kill them. Mother Empress, if you dare to touch them, your son will accompany them to the Yellow Springs." The two handsome men, "Great Crown Prince, aren't you fucking acting a little too much?" Empress Lu raised the sword over her head and instantly froze on the spot. She stared blankly at Rongli for a moment. Then, with a "wah" sound, she actually spat out a mouthful of congested blood. "Rongli, I really am a talent. I actually angered the Empress to the point of spitting out blood, Your Majesty the Empress." The two young eunuchs shrieked and flew forward to support Her Majesty the Empress, who had fallen on her back. "Your Majesty!" The young eunuchs shrieked and looked at the unconscious Empress Lu, then glanced at the calm Crown Prince. Rongli waved his hand and said, "Mother's health isn't good. Hurry and send her back to the palace to recuperate." "Yes, Your Highness." The two handsome men stood beside Rongli and tugged at the corners of his clothes, sobbing non-stop. Rongli waved his hand at the group of trembling and pale women. "You can leave first." After something like this happened, these women naturally weren't in the mood to continue playing with the Crown Prince. Moreover, just now, His Majesty had said some harsh words. His Highness the Crown Prince's position was probably going to be shaky. Sob, sob, sob. Stop sobbing. After everyone left and the palace doors closed, Rongli hurriedly pulled his sleeves back from the two men. His entire body trembled in disgust and he quickly took 3 steps back. The two sobbing men simultaneously looked up and looked at him innocently. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, your words just now," the Empress fainted from anger. "Go put on your clothes for me." Rongli glanced at the cloaks that were faintly discernible on their bodies and turned his eyes away in disdain. Humph! A set of clean clothes quickly appeared in their hands. As they took off their wet clothes, they said softly, "How heartless. Didn't you just say that you want to live and die with us?" "Rongli, by the way, did Master say when he would be able to retire?" Rongli said expressionlessly, "You two acted too much just now. Especially when the Empress raised her sword, you were so weak that I couldn't bear to look at you. She's from a brothel." One of the handsome men waved his sleeve unhappily. "She doesn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. The Empress had raised her sword to kill. What else can we do other than hide in your arms? Rongli, you guys are really shameless. As God Realm experts, where is your face to be so bold and self-righteous? Even if you deliberately sealed your cultivation, facing the Empress's 3-legged cat martial arts, can you not dodge?" Rongli raised his hand to cover his face. "You guys leave, let me be alone for a while." Humph! The two handsome men flung their sleeves and walked out in annoyance. "I don't even want to talk to you. You're the one who acted too fake. I think that the Emperor has most likely seen through your true identity." Chapter 40-28. Rongli shook his head exasperatedly and poured himself a cup of tea. Actually, it was normal for the Emperor to be suspicious of him. Which normal person would have such a drastic change in temperament in such a short period of time? He touched his face and chuckled absent-mindedly. But so what if the Emperor was suspicious of him? How could the Empress be able to figure out something that even the Emperor couldn't find out? She would probably be able to reel in the net very soon. Fengyang City, inside the command tent. Duan Yu propped up his forehead with one hand, and his gaze landed on his finger. There, a silver interspatial ring was faintly discernible and flickering. Shadow strode over and opened the tent flap with one hand. He bowed as he entered and presented a message talisman with both hands. Duan took it and looked at it for a while before tossing it back to Shadow. He nodded and said, "Wui and the others have already taken care of it." It seemed that the insufferably arrogant Her Majesty the Empress had already tasted the bitter fruit. However, this was nothing compared to the pain he had suffered. It was far from enough. "Your Highness, when are we going back?" A black line involuntarily appeared on Shadow's forehead. They had been here for 2 to 3 days, and every day, they would see the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Divine Prefecture Army, young General Xie, drop by their place when he had nothing to do. He would often look for His Highness to drink tea and chat. He didn't even know what he was doing here. Everyone would come and go as they pleased. Xie Tianwei, who was currently being nagged by Shadow, landed upside down from the small window outside the tent. He patted the dust off his body and grumbled, "Say, can you stop setting up traps outside all the time? I've already fallen into a trap 3 times. Can't you change it to something new?" Duan Yu remained silent as he swept a glance at that guy. Shadow's mouth twitched, and he walked out with the jade message talisman. Don't think he didn't see that although His Highness was looking at that young Sir Xia with disdain, there were still 2 cups of tea on the table. Xie Tianwei casually flitted over and sat in front of Duan Yu. He scooped up a cup of tea and gulped it down like a cow drinking water. "Another cup." He put down the teacup and smiled at Duan Shaoxi. "Your Highness, when do you think we can go home?" "In 2 days. Duan Yu leisurely poured him a cup of tea. "Is it because the army doesn't have enough provisions? There's a bandit stronghold nearby. We can rob it together tomorrow. It can be considered as contributing to the local people," Duan Yu said nonchalantly. Xie Lao almost spat out the tea in his mouth. He looked speechlessly at the other person's serious face and thought to himself, "No wonder this guy can become friends with our family's highness. He really has a black heart. We don't lack provisions." He really didn't lack provisions. Before he came, the Crown Prince had given him a storage talisman in private. The provisions inside were enough to last him half a year, let alone half a month. Duan Yu seemed to have thought of something, and his icy expression also eased a bit. He nodded and said, "Jojo won't let you all starve. Tomorrow, all of you will retreat 10 li. Understood?" Xie Tianwei poured a cup of tea and asked with sparkling eyes, "Your Highness, the tea here is especially delicious. How about you give me some tea leaves?" "No." Duan Yu expressionlessly refused. Xie Tianwei surreptitiously reached out and tugged at Duan Yu's sleeve. Chapter 40-29. Duan Yu glanced at him and muttered to himself for 2 seconds before replying, "I can only give you half a tael." Xie Tianwei stared at Duan Yu as if the sky had collapsed before complaining, "You're too stingy, Your Highness." Duan Yu nodded. "I can't be generous." He didn't have much in stock, so it was only enough for him to appreciate. There were only 200 taels of spirit tea leaves. After getting used to this, he would find other teas tasteless. If Xie Tianwei knew that his 4th prince only gave him half a tael of 200 taels of tea leaves, he would definitely slap this guy to death. He actually couldn't even give up a round number of 1 tael. Duan Yu took out half a tael of tea leaves and placed it in a small box before handing it to the grim-faced Xie Tianwei. He patted his shoulder. "Use it sparingly. Then are we still going to that bandit stronghold to exterminate the bandits tomorrow?" Xie Tianwei asked before leaving. Duan Yu nodded. "We have nothing to do anyway." When Xie Tianwei went out, he slipped and almost fell into the pit at the entrance again. When Ing came in with dinner, he asked exasperatedly, "What did His Highness do?" "Young Master Xie looks like he has nothing left to live for." Duan picked up his chopsticks and swiped at the noodles in the bowl before bringing it to his lips to take a bite. He pondered pensively before replying, he probably thinks I'm a bit stingy. The next day, all the courtiers in Tsangzhou received news that the Divine Prefecture army had retreated 5 kilometers away. They all beamed with joy as they spoke to His Majesty, praising His Highness the Fourth Prince for his ability. Look, he had only been there for 3 days and had already reached an agreement with the Divine Prefecture army. They were already retreating. Who else would be able to handle this matter so beautifully? Sure enough, their Tsangzhou's 4th prince was the most capable. At morning court that day, the left prime minister and his entourage, led by Wu Yong, all submitted memorials requesting that His Highness the 4th prince be the crown prince. It had only been less than 15 minutes since the emperor issued the edict to depose Crown Prince Rongli. Your Highness, Ming Province has sent an envoy and is requesting an audience with Your Highness outside the barracks, a young general of the Fierce Tiger Battalion reported outside the tent. At this time, Duan Yu and Xie Tianwei were discussing how to quickly and accurately deal with that group of people when they went to the bandit stronghold at night. When he heard the report, he couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Xie Tianwei glanced meaningfully at Duan Yu before quietly saying, "It looks like the visitor doesn't have good intentions." Duan Yu sent him a look, indicating for him to enter the inner room. This tent was different from other places. The outer room was used to discuss military matters. Inside, there was a slightly smaller bedroom. Soon, the underworld continent's emissary was led in. He strode in with his head held high and his chin raised. There was a rather proud expression on his face. "Greetings, Tsangzhou's 4th prince." Duan Yu nodded. He didn't mind Duan Yu's abnormal arrogance and merely asked aloofly, "May I know the envoy's purpose in coming?" The Ming province envoy was evidently very dissatisfied with Duan Yu's aloof attitude. He raised his chin and declared loudly, "This envoy is acting on the orders of our Ming province's crown prince to specially come to contact His Highness Prince Qin. The crown prince of Mingzhou intends to join forces with Prince Qin to make a grand plan. Ming province can dispatch 300,000 soldiers to help His Highness Prince Qin completely take over all the territory within 50 kilometers of Fengyang City." Duan Yu curled his lips and looked quite interested. He stared at that envoy and said, "Since the Crown Prince of Mingzhou is in such a good mood, why didn't he come to discuss it personally?" Chapter 40-30. The envoy's face immediately darkened, and he retorted haughtily, "How is that possible? Why would His Highness the Crown Prince personally come over for such a trivial matter? Are you an idiot?" The soldiers standing on both sides of the large tent all hung their heads, concealing the sympathy in their eyes for the envoy. The grass on the grave of that veteran general who dared to act like a boss in front of His Highness last time and shout loudly was probably about 3 meters tall. Duan Yu nodded. "Since that's the case, where are the 300,000 troops? Are the provisions adequately prepared?" The envoy looked at Duan Yu like he was an idiot. "This, naturally, we have to discuss and sign the agreement before transporting the people over. You're not Ming Yassi's subordinate, right?" Duan Yu looked at the envoy and asked with a grin. "Let me guess. Ming Yassi shouldn't be that stupid. You're Ming Province's emperor's subordinate, right?" "Sir Envoy." A thin trace of anger slid across the envoy's face. "Why do you care who I am? In short, what are you still standing there for? There's actually an idiot who can negotiate with this prince in this world." Duan Yu waved his hand indifferently. "Drag him out and behead him. Remember to keep the corpse intact and send it to Ming Province's emperor." "Yes." The envoy's face instantly turned green and white. Even as he was dragged out, he still refused to give up and shouted repeatedly, You actually dare to kill me? You! Prince Chen! You! Even if the two countries are at war, You can't kill an envoy, right? Furthermore, Ming Province and Song Province weren't freaking at war. What kind of fat fourth was this? Please, can you follow the routine? Xie Tianwei chuckled as he walked out of the inner room. He glanced at Duan Yu and said, Your Highness the Fourth Prince killed an envoy just like that. Aren't you worried that Ming Province's emperor will really send troops to surround you in a fit of rage? Duan Yu shook his head. He doesn't have the guts. Within Fengyang City, the Divine Prefecture's army was stationed with 1 million soldiers and Song Province's army was 700,000 soldiers. If Ming Province was willing to mess things up, then come. At most, I'll beat you to death and make it a one-way trip. Xie Tianwei chuckled and waved his hand. Then see you tonight, Your Highness Prince Qin. Then, he left the tent with his servant. Your Highness, this Xie Tianwei doesn't seem simple. Duan Yu absent-mindedly sat back down at the table and smoothed out the xian paper on the table. Which of the people around Mo Lian are simple? Why do you think he comes here all the time? He'll know the moment there's a commotion in the underworld province, Duan Yu said aloofly. As soon as that emissary left the underworld region, he would definitely be targeted by Xie's people. He's been waiting to see His Highness' attitude. Ing asked in surprise. Duan Yu nodded expressionlessly. Mo Lian, that fool, trusted him, but that didn't mean that all of his confidants trusted him, so now you believe in His Highness. Ing felt that these people's minds were twisted and turned, and it was really hard to understand. Duan Yu set down his brush and smiled faintly. He sighed and said, How could it be that easy? Let's wait and see. These people would eventually find out about his relationship with Mo Lian, so there was no hurry. Woof! The three puppies happily scuttled around Arbor's feet and followed her all the way to Changle Avenue. Today was a rare day of leisure, so she planned to go out for a stroll with her husband. Just as they reached the plaza, the three puppies suddenly started barking madly. They jumped in front of a notice board and tore at something with all their might. Chapter 40-31. What are they doing? A few passers-by curiously pointed at the three puppies hanging on the signboard, whispering and pointing at them as they watched. He saw the three little fellows pulling at the notice board, tearing the paper on it, and continuously letting out low growls from their mouths. What are you doing? Arbor speechlessly walked forward and glanced at the notice board, raising her eyebrows slightly. Needless to say, the notice for the blue-eyed three-headed dog had already spread from Jiawei City to the imperial capital's Longyan City. What was posted on the notice board was an extremely mighty and domineering ferocious beast drawn on it. It had 3 large sinister heads, a tall and sturdy body, and 4 hooves that were as sharp as a snow wolf's claws. Especially that pair of dark green pupils. When it looked at you faintly, it looked like it would pounce on you and bite your throat in half. It was drawn quite well. The little stoic expressionlessly glanced at the 3 puppies tearing the notice board and slightly knitted her brows. Prince Mo slowly walked over. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and whisper next to her ear, This is probably their family's ancestor. If it wasn't their ancestor, would they be in such a hurry? Arbor speechlessly glanced at this frivolous man and rolled her eyes at him. She roared at the 3, Hurry up and come over. I'll take you guys to eat delicious food. Woof, woof. The 3 puppies clawed at the notice board and whimpered softly. They abruptly turned back to look at Arbor and dashed over with a whoosh. One of them bit the hem of Qiao Mu's skirt and dragged her toward the notice board. Arbor was baffled and pointed at the wanted portrait on the notice board. You guys want me to tear it down? Woof, woof, woof. The 3 puppies madly nodded their small heads on the side, and the surrounding passers-by couldn't help but feel a bit strange. Although these 3 snowball-like puppies only looked to be the length of an arm, their bodies were extremely nimble and they seemed to be able to understand human speech. Arbor was baffled. Why would I tear it down? I didn't find the Cerberus. When she spoke up to this point, Xiaomu suddenly paused and abruptly lowered her head to glance at those 3. Woof, woof, woof. It can't be, right? Arbor narrowed his eyes and looked at the 3 puppies. He then raised his head and looked at the mighty and domineering painting on the signboard. Impossible. She immediately rejected her strange idea and muttered in a low voice, how could it be so coincidental? The most important thing was that the 3 cute puppies in front of him couldn't possibly make people associate them with the mighty and fierce beasts in the picture. Woof woof. The 3 puppies tilted their heads and hopped around on the spot. It's written on the notice that they're buying a live cerulean. A passerby said in a loud voice, you guys don't know, but the entire Jiwei city is in chaos right now. For the sake of this 100 million spirit coins, many people are looking for this Cerberus openly and secretly. The Cerberus is really rare. Yeah, I've seen a lot of 2-headed ones. Arbor glanced at the passers-by who were chatting and laughing. She stepped forward and gently kicked the 3 puppies. Hurry up and come here. What were they dawdling in the square for? She still wanted to stroll around after eating. Woof, woof, woof. The 3 puppies drooped their small heads and hopped around Arbor's legs. Arbor was annoyed by their hopping and raised her hand to pick them up. Chapter 40-32. She stuffed 2 into the arms of the exasperated Emolienne, while clattering ahead with 1 in her arms. She muttered, so baffling. Of course it was ridiculous. Could it be that she had been thinking about the blue-eyed 3-headed dog recently, so everyone looked like a 3-headed dog to her? Otherwise, why would she suddenly think that these 3 little puppies seemed to be hinting something to her? She suddenly stopped in her tracks and turned around to walk towards the signboard. Emolienne was startled and naturally followed her. She looked at her wife helplessly and said, Jojo, what's wrong? What was going on? Why did his wife suddenly have a problem with a signboard? Arbor suddenly scratched the little white puppy's fur and pointed at the 3-headed dog on the signboard. Is that your ancestor? The little puppy in her arms immediately shook its little head vigorously. The 2 in Emolienne's arms also shook their heads vigorously. The 3 little heads shook at the same time. The rhythm and frequency were really similar. Arbor hesitated for a moment and suddenly asked on a whim, is that you? Then, the crowd saw a scene that made them not know whether to laugh or cry. The 3 little puppies nodded their little heads furiously and barked, woof, woof, woof. The 3 heads nodded as if they wanted to fall off at the same time. Hey, these 3 little puppies nodded. What do you mean? What can they mean? They said that the 3-headed dog on the signboard is the 3 of them. Ah, ha ha ha. A few onlookers couldn't help but laugh. Then, there was a sound of laughter. Ah ha 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 ha. Then, there was a mocking laugh from behind the signboard. Xiaomu poked her head out while hugging the cute little puppy. She saw Lin Miao, walking over from behind the signboard while pulling along an unfamiliar girl. It looked like they had just finished eating at the restaurant behind and were coming over to watch the show. Behind the 2 of them was an 18-year-old pretty girl. Arbor recognized her at a glance. It was the beloved disciple of Hewen from the Medicine King Island, Ni Hanji, whom he had met in the mountains behind the royal school. Ni Hanji also saw Arbor at a glance. Thinking of how she had carelessly added a few strokes to the revival Bodhi grass, she knew that the girl in front of her would definitely suffer a lot. She couldn't help but feel a little proud in her heart. Who asked you to disrespect the people of the island of the Medicine King? Now that she looked at Arbor, she really didn't like it. He boasted shamelessly that he could refine the soul-returning pill, but in the end, didn't he still have to rely on the Bodhi soul-returning pill's pill formula given by his master to gather all the ingredients? Others might not know who had issued the warrant for the blue-eyed Cerberus, but Hanji knew better than anyone else. Apart from Prince Mo, who was able to gather the power of the entire nation, who else would be able to afford 100 million spirit coins? She was truly a shameless seductress. She could actually make the crown prince disregard his reputation to help her. Hanji's eyes lit up with a trace of anger. These two people dared to give her and her master the cold shoulder, so they should be prepared to die. That Prince Mo actually dared to look down on her. A little crown prince of the divine land dared to look down on the Medicine King Island. What a joke, she didn't like him. Hanji wouldn't want a married man even if he was given to her. The man that she, Hanji, liked must be the most outstanding man in the world. Chapter 40-33. Oh, what am I seeing? Lin Miao laughed so hard that tears were about to fall out. What a joke. Lin Miao pretended to wipe away the non-existent tears at the corners of her eyes. Look, Miss Chow is talking to 3 little grass dogs. Do you really think that these 3 little dogs are ancient ferocious beasts? Ha 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 ha. When Lin Miao laughed like this, the surrounding onlookers also wanted to laugh. However, they restrained themselves, especially when they saw the little stoic's expressionless face. For some reason, they felt like they couldn't continue laughing. They felt like they were laughing like idiots. The girl with icy skin and snow-white bones in front of them had a stoic face and didn't give them any response at all for a long time. Arbor raised her hand to stroke the little puppy's fur. Meanwhile, the little puppy in her arms bared its teeth at Lin Miao, and made a lunging posture. Humph. Lin Miao harumphed coldly and glanced disapprovingly at the 3 little puppies. She mocked, Miss Chow, can't be that you really believe these 3 little mongrel dogs, right? They think that because there are 3 heads drawn on the painting, ha ha ha, they're the 3 of them. At this point, Lin Miao started jeering loudly and wantonly again. Ha ha ha, that's really too funny. They're 3-headed dogs, not 3 dogs. Pfft, the surrounding onlookers couldn't help but want to laugh again, but they glanced at the still expressionless Sir Jojo. They couldn't laugh again for some reason. Mo Lien knitted her brows and walked up to pull her wifey over. Just as she was about to speak, Arbor pulled her hand to stop her. Jojo's lotus was simply lowering her status by talking to them. The best way was to let these women perform a one-man show on their own. She couldn't be bothered to pay attention to them. She was standing here talking to her little puppies. Why did she need these irrelevant people to express their opinions? She was simply crazy. Arbor raised her hand, and the painting that had been ripped apart by the 3 little puppies floated into her hand. Arbor scratched the puppy's head and asked again with a serious face, was it you? Woof, 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 woof. The 3 puppies nodded their heads in unison, with an expression that said, yes, 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 please praise me. Mo Lien glanced at his wife in amusement and held her little hand. Is it true? If these 3 puppies were really the Cerberus, then it would be a huge joke. Husband, don't forget to pay me 100 million spirit coins. Mo Lien, wife, my spirit coins are all yours. Arbor thought about it and agreed. He glanced at him regretfully and said, it's rare that I want to give away a wave of wealth, but I can't. Mo Lien couldn't help but nod. That's true. What else could he say? Wasn't it all because his wife was awesome? Although these 3 little puppies were completely different from the mighty and domineering Cerberus, but he felt that these 3 puppies didn't need to lie to them. Moreover, in retrospect, the things that these 3 puppies had done were all very strange. For example, They liked to gnaw on divine beasts and holy beasts, and they didn't eat elixirs that weren't divine grade or above. He remembered that when the three puppies were fighting the two-headed dragon on Mount Daizong, they tore off the scales and barbs on the holy beast's neck with one bite. After that, these three puppies' behavior was never normal. Chapter 40-34. Other people didn't know how extraordinary these three puppies were, but as their master, the little girl was naturally well aware of their abilities. At this time, she met Mo Lian's eyes, and both of them saw confirmation in each other's eyes. These three puppies most likely weren't lying to them. They were probably really the ancient vicious three-headed dog. But Lin Muir's ridicule seemed to have some truth to it. They had never seen a three-headed dog turn into a three-headed dog before. This was too bizarre. Arbor glanced at the puppy in her arms and patted its head. Then why didn't you say anything when we issued the arrest warrant earlier? Woof, woof. The puppy looked at its little master in bewilderment. Arbor also felt that her question was a bit funny. At that time, she and Mo Lian were discussing how to issue the arrest warrant in Jiawei City, so these three puppies weren't with her. If it weren't for the fact that they could see arrest warrants everywhere on the streets today, these three puppies would probably still be in the dark. They were actually wanted by their master. Xiao Mu covered her small face with her hand, suddenly at a loss for words. How should she put it? This really was a huge misunderstanding. The little stoic petted the puppy's chubby body before turning around to pull Mo Lian to the side of the plaza as if no one else was around. There were many restaurants and tea houses here, so they could just pick one to eat first. Besides, there were too many people here, so it wasn't convenient for her to communicate with the puppies. Or when Lin Muir saw that the husband and wife pair didn't pay any attention to her, she directly walked around them to leave. She instantly felt a bit angry, and she didn't know where her courage came from, but she suddenly reached out to block Arbor's path. Wait. Mo Lian's cold and heavy eyes swept over Lin Muir's face. Arbor hooked her arm around her husband's arm and glanced at her with a bored expression. She said indifferently, "What, do you want to lose a few more teeth? Or do you not want your face anymore?" Lin Muir's face stiffened. "Do you really think your Lin family can do whatever you want in the sovereign capital?" Arbor reprimanded mercilessly. "You can try. You." Muir. The girl on the side hastily grabbed her and curtsied. "Crown Princess, please don't be angry. Muir is only joking with you. What's so funny?" Arbor's voice was cold as she swept her gaze around her. "Funny?" Everyone shook their heads in unison. What was so funny about this? Now, everyone had the strange illusion that they were about to get involved in the fun. What does it have to do with you whether my three little dogs are Cerberus or not? What a bunch of weird women. What a bunch of weird women. You're lying. Lin Muir angrily flung her companion's hand away. Gu Yisun bit her lip and looked helplessly at the angry Lin Muir. She then looked back at Miss Ni Hanji from Medicine King Island as if asking for help. Miss Ni had a high status in the Lin family. As long as she was willing to say a word, Muir probably wouldn't clash with the crown princess. But would Ni Hanji dissuade her? She watched gleefully, wishing nothing more than to see Xiao Mu suffer a setback. Even if Lin Muir didn't start a fight, she would still say a few words and let them fight. Moreover, now that Lin Muir had stepped forward to pick a fight with Arbor, why would she stop her? Do you dare to compete? Chapter 40-35. Compete. Arbor stared strangely at the woman in front of him. Hadn't this woman received enough of a lesson? Did she want to seek her own suffering again? The little stoic was disinterested and was about to flatly refuse this person's request. Suddenly, Lin Muir raised her hand. Bang! After a loud noise, panicked cries came from the crowd. At the same time, everyone hurriedly retreated in a flurry. A huge black dog descended from the sky in front of Xiao Mu. Its four thick and solid paws were clawing at the ground as drool dripped from its mouth. It was currently staring fixedly at Xiao Mu with a pair of small eyes that were like ice shards. Mo Lian reflexively pulled his wife into his arms and narrowed his eyes, fury flitting through them. "You're courting death." His tone was abnormally icy, and when he stared at Lin Muir, the latter unexpectedly shuddered. When Ni Hanji saw this, she stepped forward and stood next to Lin Muir with a grin. "What does Your Highness the Crown Prince mean?" "Miss Lin merely wants to follow the Crown Princess's three-headed dogs," she sneered and disdainfully swept her gaze over the three small dogs. She continued, "It's just a competition. How is this enough to anger the Crown Princess? Could it be that you don't dare to compete? Yo yo yo. It's so lively." And Wushuang's voice came from afar. Arbor turned around and sure enough, he saw a fiery red figure squeezing through the crowd and running over like a wisp of smoke. "Oh my, such a big dog. Who are you trying to scare here?" And Wushuang's gaze swept around and finally landed on Lin Muir, who had an unsightly expression. She giggled and said, "Why is it you again? What, this commandery princess didn't teach you enough last time? Now that your teeth are fixed, you're making a ruckus on the streets again." When Lin Muir saw in Wushuang's unrestrained manner, she felt her teeth ache for no reason. She herself didn't realize that she had involuntarily taken 2 steps back. He stared at Wushuang warily and sneered, "Don't slander me. Who is causing trouble on the streets?" Lin Muir said loudly. I just came to." She took a deep breath and looked at Arbor angrily. "How about it? Do you dare to compete with me? Didn't you say that these 3 puppies are Cerberus? Why don't we let them compete? Right and wrong, we will know once we compare them." Meow, Gu Yisin tugged at her sleeve. She wanted to advise her not to cause any more trouble. However, how could Lin Meow listen to her? She flung her hand away. In addition, the troublemaker Ni Hanji chuckled. Could it be that the Crown Princess is afraid of losing? "Are you weak now?" Lin Muir became even more excited. Today, she was going to expose this woman's lies. Xiao Mu rolled her eyes and glanced at Lin Meow in utter boredom. The 3 puppies beside her could even bite a holy beast to death. It didn't matter if they were Cerberus or not, this was the truth. The giant black dog that Lin Muir summoned was just a spiritual beast. It wasn't even at the level of a divine beast. How could it run up to its death? It was either crazy or stupid. Where are the Crown Princess guards? Prince Mo couldn't help but laugh. Several figures suddenly appeared beside Arbor. Arbor pointed impatiently. "So long-winded. Throw them into the capital's prison and lock them up for 3 to 5 days. Chapter 4036. Lin Miao, Gu Yisin, and even Ni Hanji, who was watching from the side, were all dumbfounded. What was going on? The shadow guards rushed forward and grabbed Lin Miao's arm. Seeing that she still wanted to resist, they slashed the back of her neck with a knife. Lin Miao lowered her head in pain and said angrily through gritted teeth, "Crown Princess, what are you trying to do?" The little Crown Princess looked like she couldn't be bothered to talk to an idiot. She waved her hand, "Take her away." 2 shadow guards immediately grabbed Lin Miao, like they were grabbing a little chick, and carried her in the direction of the capital office. Gu Yisin was dumbfounded. Ni Hanji was also a little dumbfounded. She couldn't help but raise her voice and say angrily, "What do you mean by this? She just wants to compete with you in spiritual beasts, why are you, take her away too?" The little crown princess raised her hand impatiently. Immediately, 2 more hidden guards rushed over and grabbed the cursing Ni Hanji without saying a word. They dragged her towards the capital office. "Let me go, you. Impudent. Impudent." Ni Hanji was so angry that her heart ached. She had never been treated like this before. What kind of crown princess was this? She was simply a crazy person. Why did she send them to the capital office's prison without saying anything? If Empress Dowager Qin was here, she would definitely want to curse out loud. This little crown princess was indeed a piece of trash. She wanted to compete with you in spiritual beasts, but you used your power to suppress her. She wanted to play harem and mind games with you, but you didn't play by the rules at all and used your strength to suppress her. How could they continue to play with you? You didn't play harem games, you didn't play with strength in Jianghu. You were the opposite of everyone. Who could continue to play with you happily? Pfft, and Wushuang almost burst out laughing. She opened her mouth and laughed out loud. But at this moment, Lin Miao's howl came from afar. In the blink of an eye, that huge black dog that was scratching its paws on the ground suddenly flared up all its fur and pounced at Xiao Mu with a whoosh. Roar! Woof woof, woof! The 3 little white dogs' fur bristled as they leaped out. Whoosh! 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 They pounced on the large black dog like 3 bolts of lightning. One of them bit its back, the other its chest, and the last one pounced on its throat and bit it right in the face. After a few tearing sounds, the giant dog let out a miserable howl. 3 pieces of flesh were torn off by the cute little puppy, and blood immediately gushed out like a fountain. Woof! And Wushuang was completely stunned. She rubbed her eyes. The silent crowd suddenly burst into a burst of panicked screams. Wow! Everyone rolled and crawled as they fled in all directions in a sorry state. They were scared to the point their scalps went numb. What the fuck is going on? How could these 3 little puppies, which were only the size of a palm, bite such a huge dog to death in a pool of blood? Wasn't this a little too cruel? Gu Yisin was the only one of the 3 girls who hadn't been taken away. At this moment, she was so scared that she sat down on the ground. Her legs were stained with dog blood. She was so scared that she kept retreating, her whole body trembling uncontrollably. This was too frightening, too frightening. The 3 adorable little puppies had actually been able to unleash such power all of a sudden. No one had expected this, and no one was mentally prepared. So they all went home with vomiting expressions and had nightmares. Chapter 40-37. In the blue and white restaurant, the little crown princess was stroking the fur of the 3 puppies beside her. And Wushuang laughed with a wine glass in her hand. I think those onlookers won't be able to sleep tonight. It was too funny. Thinking back to the confused, frightened, and defenseless expressions on everyone's faces, ha 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 ha, Princess Wushuang burst into laughter. Mo Lian looked at the bright candle in disdain and took the dishes in front of her to arbor. Don't spray. Brother, you're not giving me any face at all. Princess Wushuang's face immediately turned bitter. Give you no face. I'll give you face when you get married obediently. Don't come looking for your sister-in-law for no reason and affect our married life. And Wushuang really wanted to smash the wine glass in her hand into his face. Arbor blinked and glanced at Mo Lian beside him, then looked up at Princess Wushuang. Wushuang, why are you here? And Wushuang immediately dragged the stool towards Arbor. I'm here to talk to my sister-in-law. Sister-in-law, I don't know if you've heard that the people from the Medicine King Island want to hold an elixir auction in Dragonflame City. Sister-in-law, are you free? Let's go and have fun together. Your sister-in-law is not free. Mo Lien rejected her without hesitation. Third Fu will be back in the capital tomorrow. He should be free these days. You can go and find him. And Wushuang's head drooped, and she lowered it. Arbor looked at Mo Lien in confusion. Mo Lien took his wife's hand and glared at Wushuang with a look of disappointment. She's just a papaya head. Jojo, help me persuade her when you're free. Brother, can we not talk about him? And Wushuang glared at him angrily. Arbor dragged the stool towards Wushuang and asked her, Lien said that you and third young Master Fu are in love with each other. Why do you have such an expression at the mention of him? The little fellow said to her with an experienced expression, You haven't seen someone you like for a long time, don't you miss him? If Jojo's Rin leaves for a while, Jojo will miss her. Mo Lien, what should he do if he felt that his wife was hilarious? And Wushuang mumbled and said sourly, Don't listen to brother's nonsense. Third young Master Fu already has a fiancé. Why should I join in the fun? What? Jojo was unhappy when he heard this. I didn't expect Third Fu to be such a scumbag. He actually had a wife and still came to provoke you. Then just ignore him. Mo Lien did not know whether to laugh or cry. He quickly pulled his wife to his side and tried to prove his brother's innocence in a low voice. Third Fu doesn't have a wife. Don't listen to Wushuang's nonsense. Third Fu has done a meritorious deed by clearing out the zombies in Li City. Let's ask father to arrange a marriage for him. Why was there so much trouble? Wushuang was the only one who liked to let her imagination run wild. Brother. And Wushuang called out in dissatisfaction. All right. Mo Lien could not be bothered with her and waved his hand. You're so long-winded. A 19-year-old girl is even more naggy than a 90-year-old woman. And Wushuang, exclamation point. Brother, what did I say? From the beginning to the end, you were the only one talking and acting on your own, okay? It really made her speechless. Xiao Mu couldn't resist smiling as the corner of her mouth turned up. Chapter 40-38. After a while, Arbor took out a silver needle and tested it on the three puppies. Then, she sighed and put down the needle. It's useless to take blood now. Why? And Wushuang asked curiously. I think these three puppies are extraordinarily brave. They're even braver than the tigers and wolves in my army. Wushuang built a tiger and wolf battalion. Mo Lien put the peeled shrimp on the small plate in front of Arbor and said with a smile, Jojo, is there any way to strengthen the bodies of tigers and wolves? Those should be low-level spiritual beasts. Arbor tilted her head. There is. She took out a few bottles of medicinal liquid from her inner world and put them in front of Wushuang. These were the medicinal liquid of the breakthrough pills that she had made. It should be effective for both human and beast bodies. She remembered that her master had left many advancement pills in the longevity hole. She guessed that these would be useful. She would send a few bottles to Princess Wushuang later. Dilute these medicinal liquid before giving it to them. Just add a little to their food every day. And Wushuang nodded and took the bottles happily. Sister-in-law, I've heard that your alchemy skills are superb. I didn't expect that you'd also have experience in improving beasts. The medicinal pills that ordinary alchemists made were naturally targeted at human cultivators. Arbor had so many beasts around her, so she was different. When she was free, she would think about how to make some pills to improve her beasts. After a long time, she naturally gained a lot of experience. Mo Lien poked a cute little puppy in the next episode and shook his head in exasperation. It seems that my previous conjecture wasn't wrong. After the Cerberus escaped from the Tower of Punishment, it asked for your protection. Mo Lien had a funny expression. Speaking of which, these three puppies had good taste. If they followed Jojo, even if the heavenly Tao wanted to attack them, it would have to consider whether it could defeat Jojo first. Woof. One of the puppies flipped its body over and revealed a heroic expression. You can poke Master Silver. Ada is not afraid of pain. Arbor couldn't help but twitch his mouth. He rubbed its fur and shook his head. If you can't regain your status as a holy beast, it's useless even if you take the blood. The Cerberus should have been heavily injured by the heavenly Tao when it escaped from the Tower of Punishment. Mo Lien pondered for a moment before saying, Jojo, think about it. Before this, it had always wanted to eat the two-headed Zhao's sacred beast crystal core. Later on, it didn't even want to let go of the sacred beast lion's egg. Xiao Mu nodded. She also remembered how these three little fellows had disdainfully eaten the spirit beast raging flamehound's crystal core. Their reluctant attitude made it seem like the spirit beast crystal core was neglecting them. They were overjoyed when they saw the phoenix spring, and they even wanted to eat the poisonous flower king, a saint-ranked poisonous creature. Everything shows that they are trying their best to recover their strength. Mo Lien sighed softly. Poor Cerberus. It was a holy beast, but what kind of dog had it been beaten into by the heavenly Tao? Why couldn't it even speak human language? Lord Jojo rubbed the three puppies' heads sympathetically and said softly but firmly, Master Silver will refine restoration pills for you to help you recover your strength. Now, they had to find a holy beast, kill it, and peel off its crystal core for them to consume. This was something that could only be chanced upon and not sought. As for pills, compared to Jojo, it was much simpler. Woof. Chapter 40-39. The three puppies felt a sense of bliss that they had never felt before. Master finally understood them completely. Master, you're finally enlightened. Oh, whoa, it's not that we want to snatch delicious food, it's that we really want to recover our strength. We really want to give Master a kiss. However, looking at the great crown prince, who was sitting on the side and glancing at them out of the corner of his eye from time to time, the three puppies very conscientiously didn't act rashly. Who the hell knew what would happen to them if they kissed Master? Sir Jojo had a solemn and earnest expression as he patted the three puppies' heads. It's been hard on you. Don't worry, with me here, you'll definitely recover as good as new. Moreover, Heavenly Law can forget about finding trouble with you in the future. Woof. Master is mighty in Wuxuang. She suddenly felt that her sister-in-law was so awesome. How did Heavenly Law get involved? Downstairs, after the large dog's corpse was cleaned up by the city guards, the pedestrians on the streets gradually started to move more densely. After the trio finished eating, they left the room and walked downstairs. Arbor suddenly turned around and tugged at her husband's sleeve. She pointed at a stall opposite the door. Husband, there's someone selling white sugar cakes over there. I want to eat them. Mo Lien looked in the direction she pointed and nodded. Wait for me in the carriage first. I'll buy them and bring them over. Arbor nodded. Seeing that the white sugar cake stall was doing well and that there were several people lining up in front of the stall, she thought that the taste should be pretty good, so she could buy a few more pieces and leave them for the snack vendor Lin. Mo Lien left with quick steps with a smile. When Arbor turned around, she saw Princess Wuxuang clutching her chest with a pitiful expression that said, Why are you abusing dogs? The little stoic lifted her hand to rub Wuxuang's head and said earnestly, Younger sister, after you get married in the future, you'll also be as good as us when you meet a considerate husband. And Wuxuang's feet almost slipped, and her head almost hit the door frame. Damn, her sister-in-law was younger than her by 3 years. Looking at her senior-like expression, it really didn't match her stoic face. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. The eldest sister-in-law was like a mother. Princess Wushwang repeated it 3 times in her heart and adjusted her expression. The two of them chatted as they walked out. As soon as they reached the door, they came face to face with a woman who was surrounded by a myriad of stars. That young lady was protected by 3 maidservants. When she caught sight of Princess Wushwang and the little stoic, she was slightly taken aback. Then, she hurriedly curtsied and said, "Princess Wushwang." That woman's gaze paused on Wushwang's face for several seconds before landing on the little stoic and giving her 2 probing glances. Arbor naturally didn't recognize the woman who was secretly sizing him up. After all, ever since she came to the Divine Prefecture, she had been quite busy. She had been running between the academy and the capital, and sometimes she would go out to train for long periods of time. She was not in the capital. Other than occasionally attending palace banquets and meeting the madams of the families of third-rank high officials and above, as well as the womenfolk of some extremely famous patrician families in the imperial capital, she wasn't familiar with the rest. When Wushwang saw that young lady, her expression didn't have much of a reaction. She merely swept her calm gaze over her and nodded at her. "Miss Bao doesn't need to be so courteous." After saying this, she took the little crown princess' hand and brushed past that young lady, looking like she didn't want to say anything more. "Princess, please wait." Chapter 40. However, Miss Bao suddenly called out to Wushwang when they brushed past each other. Arbor and Wushwang turned to look at her at the same time. Princess Wushwang said indifferently, "Is there anything else, Miss Bao?" Miss Bao was about 18 or 19 years old. She looked very sweet and pleasant, and her smile was graceful and delicate. She looked very gentle and demure. Miss Bao was also dressed in red, but her style was different from Princess Wushwang's. Wushwang's gaze was more resolute than that of ordinary girls. She looked valiant, and with her fiery red makeup, one could tell that she had the demeanor of a general. However, Miss Bao's red dress made her look graceful and alluring. The red dress made her soft and beautiful face look even more radiant and enchanting. Qiao Mu creased her brows. She didn't notice it earlier, but after taking a closer look, she couldn't help but feel baffled. This Miss Bao in front of her actually wore the same outfit as Commandery Princess Wushwang. This really was awkward. "Do you have time, Princess? Can we have a chat in the wing room?" Princess Wushwang rejected her without hesitation. "I don't have time." Miss Bao's expression froze, but she seemed to be used to Princess Wushwang's tone. She smiled sweetly and said, "I won't take up too much of your time. I just want to say a few words." Princess Wushwang's face was full of impatience. Miss Bao hurriedly added, "Yes, it's about my husband." Princess Wushwang's expression changed slightly. Arbor, who was standing at the side, sized Miss Bao up in confusion. "I see that you are dressed as an unmarried girl. How can you have a husband?" Miss Bao's face flushed slightly. She rubbed the handkerchief in her hand and said in a low voice, "I've embarrassed myself in front of this young madam." Princess Wushwang frowned as if she could not bear to hear Miss Bao's nonsensical address. She said lightly, "This is the crown princess. Why aren't you coming forward to greet her?" Miss Bao was shocked, but she did not show it on her face. She hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. "I am Bao Tsuaping. Greetings to the crown princess." The little crown princess was getting impatient. "Get up. Don't block the way." Bao Tsuaping's face stiffened. She was standing at the entrance of the restaurant. With 3 maidservants, she blocked the entrance and exit of the restaurant. Arbor and the others couldn't get out. There were also 2 or 3 madams and young misses who were watching the fun outside, but they couldn't get in either. The 3 maidservants behind Bao Tsuaping hurriedly took 2 steps back. Bao Tsuaping's expression was rather awkward as she dodged to the side and said softly, Your Highness, Tsuaping only wants to say a few words about my husband. Actually, it won't take up too much of your time. I know what you want to say. And Wushuang waved her hand impatiently and interrupted her. Don't worry. I, and Wushuang, have my own pride. Humph, Tsuaping didn't mean it that way. Please don't be angry, Your Highness. Bao Tsuaping quickly lowered her head with tears in her eyes. Her pitiful appearance as if she was being bullied instantly attracted the attention of many people in the hall. And Wushuang was infuriated. This Miss Bao was most likely crazy. She had the nerve to stand here and let everyone in the hall gossip about her. And Wushuang even felt embarrassed for her. The little crown princess looked speechlessly at that girl. She shook her head and sighed. Stop pretending. I'm about to throw up the food I just ate. Chapter 40-41. And Wushuang was taken aback, and she turned to look at her sister-in-law. The little stoic was expressionless, but the words that came out of her mouth were venomous to the extreme. Wushuang only told you to move aside and not block the way, but you look like someone beat you up. What's going on? If other people don't want to talk to me, I definitely won't pester them. But you? Why do you keep blocking us? It's not like that. Bao Tsuaping looked pitiful and on the verge of collapse. She knitted her willowy brows and said with tears in her eyes, Crown Princess, please forgive me. This humble girl didn't mean to block. The little Crown Princess raised her hand and stopped her from continuing. If you don't mean to, then move aside. She was so long-winded that she couldn't even eat in peace. Miss Bao's body suddenly tilted, as if she had fainted from anger, and she abruptly slumped onto her maidservant. Those 3 maidservants immediately shrieked anxiously, Miss. Arbor wordlessly turned his head back and met the similarly speechless Princess Wushuang's eyes. Was she sick? The little crown princess looked at Princess Wushuang oddly. Princess Wushuang nodded in full agreement. Wasn't she sick? At this time, her illness of fainting from time to time was truly becoming more frequent. Princess. A maidservant hurriedly said, Our miss only wanted to say a few words to you, Princess. Do you need to anger her to the point of fainting? Tsuaping. A man's shout came from outside. A young man in luxurious brocade clothes quickly squeezed in from the entrance and supported the unconscious Bao Tsuaping. What's going on? Tsuaping. What are you all still standing there for? Hurry and call for a physician. That man supported Bao Tsuaping, and his sharp eyes glared at the little crown princess and Princess Wushuang. He didn't recognize the little crown princess, but he evidently recognized Wushuang. Thus, his gaze ultimately landed on Wushuang, and he shouted harshly, Princess Wushuang, why is it you again? Do you think our Marquis Ning estate is easy to bully? Tsuaping fainted from anger every time. Princess Wushuang really wanted to tell him, young man, don't you think that it's not normal for your cousin to faint from anger every time? The little crown princess shook her head and looked sympathetically at Bao Tsuaping who was in the man's arms. She said indifferently, her body is completely useless. Why is it that you fainted for no reason when you were talking properly? I looked at her face and saw that it was slightly pale. It seemed that her liver, kidney, lungs, and meridians were blocked. You will be frightened and restless when you sleep. You will suffer from insomnia and many dreams. If it's more serious, it will cause the body to lose balance, faint at any time, and even walk unsteadily. The heart meridians are full and large, which means that the body is very hot, and the meridians are not very harmonious. If this were allowed to continue, he would develop epilepsy symptoms in the future. Spasms in the limbs, spasms in the veins, and in more serious cases, infertility for life. Everyone was speechless. At the side, Princess Wushuang's mouth was slightly agape, and she looked as if she had seen a god. She stared blankly at her sister-in-law. My God, the little crown princess was really vicious. She said that fainting was a big problem and that there would be more serious problems in the future. Everyone looked again at Bao Cuiping, who was lying in the man's arms. At this moment, her limbs were indeed spasming. They instantly looked at the little crown princess as if they were looking at a peerless doctor. The rumors were indeed true. Chapter 40-42. The crown princess's medical skills were superb. She had single-handedly pulled the dying empress back from the gates of hell. No wonder she could tell at a glance that this girl's body was not well. If it got worse, she would develop epilepsy. Look, weren't her limbs already twitching uncontrollably? No one knew that Bao Cuiping was twitching in anger at the crown princess's poisonous tongue. Mississippi, the three servant girls were terrified. They knelt by their Mrs. side and called her name repeatedly. Bao Cuiping could only pretend that she was slowly waking up. She groaned and slowly opened her eyes. At this time, the young crown princess and Princess Wushuang had already walked out hand in hand. Seeing this, the young master of the Changningho estate immediately shouted angrily, "Stop! Princess Wushuang, shouldn't you give an explanation for bullying a girl of my Changningho estate?" Princess Wushuang looked coldly at the young master and said coolly, "Fourth young master Fu, what explanation do you want?" As she spoke, she unhurriedly untied the red soft whip from her waist. Without any explanation, she swung it in his direction. Startled, fourth young master Fu hurriedly raised his arm to block. Unexpectedly, he was hit squarely by the red whip. "Are you satisfied with this explanation?" And Wushuang looked at her coldly. Her tone suddenly became stern. "If you are not satisfied, you can come with me to His Majesty to judge. I, and Wushuang, can even go to war. Why would I be afraid of a little Changningho playboy? I, and Wushuang, went to war when I was 13. I have guarded the borders for more than 6 years. I have participated in 103 wars, big and small. What explanation do I need to give you? What explanation do you want me to give you?" Her eyes were full of disdain and disdain. Once her aura rose, no one in the hall dared to speak. Not to mention a little playboy of the Changningho estate, even if there were court officials in front of her, they would have to bow their heads and respectfully call her Princess Wushuang. Hatred flashed through Bao Cuiping's eyes. She wiped her tears and sobbed quietly. "Princess, why did you have to be so harsh on cousin? Cousin didn't do anything to you," and Wushuang looked over coldly. There was a hint of a smile on her face, and a cold and sharp aura was emitted from her. Bao Cuiping hurriedly lowered her eyes, hiding the faint haze in her eyes. And Wushuang didn't say anything else. She held Arbor's hand and walked out of the Azure Flower restaurant together. "Sister-in-law, you can continue shopping with my brother. I'll go back first," Princess Wushuang said with a smile. Arbor knew that she must be in a bad mood after what happened just now. He nodded and said, "Okay." And Wushuang bid farewell and left. Not long after, Prince Mo returned with 2 bags of white sugar cakes. Not bad, not bad. Wushuang was quite sensible. She knew that she could not continue to stay here and disturb the young couple. She should have left tactfully. Arbor glanced at him and pulled him into the carriage. He couldn't help but ask curiously, "That cousin of the Changningho estate, Miss Bao, is Third Fu's fiancé?" "What fiancé?" The crown prince curled his lip in disdain. Third Fu's stepmother can't decide his marriage. Every family has its own difficulties. The crown prince held his wife's small hand and said in a low voice, "His stepmother doesn't have good intentions. She always wants to push her niece to Third Fu. Chapter 40-43. That Miss Bao is Third Fu's stepmother's niece. The little crown princess looked curious and gossipy. The crown prince nodded disdainfully. Madame Ne Bao harbors evil intentions and thinks she can do whatever she wants in the Marquis Ning estate. What a joke. Then what's up with the engagement? The little crown princess asked curiously. I saw that Wushuang's attitude towards the people of the Marquis Ning estate is very cold. She probably also resents Third Fu. The engagement was arranged by Madame Ne Bao's wishful thinking, but she didn't go through any formalities. This matter has spread like wildfire in the capital. You mean that the stepmadam is scheming against Third Fu? The crown prince nodded and pinched the little crown princess's cheek with a smile. Third Fu can handle it himself, so we don't need to worry too much about him. Third Fu has contributed greatly in suppressing the zombies in Li City this time. Royal Father will definitely reward him when the time comes. Speaking of which, the three provinces haven't been too peaceful recently. The little crown princess lifted her head and opened the bag to take out a small piece of white sugar cake. She put it in her mouth and took a bite. Say, should we go destroy their nests? Prince Mo couldn't help but want to laugh. He pulled his wifey's hand and said, Jojo, do you feel a bit idle? Don't tell me you forgot that the finals of the Heaven Primordial Roll will be held in 10 days. We'll have something to do then. The little crown princess nodded reluctantly and couldn't resist muttering to herself, I wonder if Duanyu, that guy, will come at that time. Since he promised that he would appear, then he will definitely come. The next day, Third Young Master Fu led a group of generals into the capital and reported the situation of suppressing the zombies in Li City. The emperor was overjoyed and conferred upon him the title of third-rank General Wooding and bestowed upon him a residence in the general's estate on Chang'an South Street. That afternoon, General Wooding's estate was blessed with 2 joyous events. His Majesty selected a matchmaker and bestowed a marriage between General Wooding and Princess Wushuang. The Crown Prince and the little Crown Princess were sitting in the Eastern Palace, eating snacks and gossiping. When the topic of the marriage came up, the two of them were enjoying it. Just wait and see. This matter is not over yet. The Crown Prince said with certainty. It would be strange if the Fu family could stop. This is a marriage arranged by His Majesty. Can the second lady of the Marquis Ning Manor make a fuss and defy the decree? Ha! Mo Lien pinched his wife's small, round chin. There really are a lot of people with holes in their brains in this world. Xiao Yi suddenly jumped in and cupped his hands at the two of them. Your Highness, Crown Princess. The Fu family is really causing trouble at Third Young Master Fu's residence. When Prince Mo heard this, he immediately pulled his wife to her feet. Let's go, Jojo. I'll take you to watch the show. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. Am I such a person who likes to watch the show? No. The Crown Prince immediately shook his head and said with a grin, It's your husband who likes to watch. Xiao Yi stood behind the two of them and rolled his eyes helplessly. His Highness the Crown Prince was usually a dignified and calm person, but in front of the Crown Princess, he didn't seem like a normal person. If His Highness had a tail behind him, it would definitely be wagging happily. Xiao Yi looked at the two of them with a strange expression. For some reason, he inexplicably associated his master with a cute pet. Mo Lien seemed to sense something and suddenly glanced at Xiao Yi. Chapter 40-44. The latter hurriedly adjusted his expression and bowed to his master with an incomparably sincere face. Master, this way please. No one knew what he was thinking in his heart. Mo Lien glanced at Xiao Yi and pulled his wife's small hand. The two of them quickly walked out. Wait. Arbor took out a transportation talisman array and waved it at his fingertips. Use this. Xiao Ye's eyes brightened. The great crown princess was indeed wise. Since they were going to watch the show, of course, the faster the better. It would save them the trouble and they could watch the entire show. Mo Lian inwardly pursed her lips in amusement. Who was the one who said that he wasn't interested in watching the show? The three of them instantly disappeared from the transportation talisman array. When they reappeared, they were already standing in an alley on Changle Street. They were about a few minutes away from the newly bestowed General Wooding's residence by the Emperor. Should we use an invisibility talisman? The little crown princess asked with a curious expression. Xiao Ye's mouth twitched. Where can't our crown prince go? Why use an invisibility talisman? It's not like we're going to sneak around. His Highness the Crown Prince immediately nodded. We're going to watch the show openly. Who can chase us out? The little crown princess silently put away her talisman and nodded. All right then, lead the way. Xiao Ye's mouth twitched. For some reason, he felt that the crown princess was actually very keen on watching the show. Don't be fooled by her expressionless face. Heh, there was already a trace of excitement in her tone. The three of them quickly ran to the entrance of General Wooding's residence. Coincidentally, they saw a carriage speeding to the entrance of the general's residence. Before the carriage came to a stop, they saw a figure dressed in red with a swoosh darting out of the carriage. There was a scarlet whip in his hand and he looked like he was about to pick a fight. The little crown princess hurriedly pulled His Highness the Crown Prince to hide under the eaves at the side. She poked her head out to look with a gloating expression. Third Fu acted first and reported later. He asked Imperial Father to approve the marriage. Wushuang came to the door with a whip. Wushuang, this lass, is merely a paper tiger. Don't be fooled by how she's all bark and no bite. She'll definitely wilt after being coaxed with a few words. Crown Prince Mo whispered into his daughter-in-law's ear. While they were talking, they saw a white figure stumbling out of the alley. With a sharp cry, she threw herself in front of Princess Wushuang. Princess, I beg you to show mercy. And Wushuang took a closer look and couldn't help but roll her eyes. Wasn't it Bao Zuiping Bao Wushuang's daughter who she had seen at the restaurant yesterday? Bao Zuiping was crying so hard that she looked like she was about to stop breathing. She sobbed and said, Your Highness, please be magnanimous and let Zuiping go. Please don't steal my husband from me, okay? You are noble, dignified, and beautiful. Why do you have to steal someone else's husband? I already have an engagement with my husband. Princess Wushuang was so angry that her face turned pale. She suddenly flung Bao Zuiping's hand away and said harshly, What nonsense are you talking about? Do you believe that I will whip your stinky mouth to death? The princess was so anxious that she burst out with vulgarities. Her eyes widened in anger and Bao Zuiping shrank back in fear. I want to steal your man. Princess Wushuang said angrily, What are you thinking? Can't you see that I am also here to ask about the situation? Get out of here immediately. Chapter 40-45. With a creaking sound, the door of General Wooding's residence suddenly opened to both sides. Third young Master Fu appeared in front of An Wushuang in a flash. When An Wushuang saw this guy, she was instantly enraged. She raised her whip and lashed it at his handsome face that didn't stop. I'll whip you to death, you little bastard. How dare you scheme against me? Tell me, did you say something in front of His Majesty? This imperial edict came as fast as lightning. She was just sitting at home, and disaster came from the heavens. The imperial edict hit her on the spot, and she was stunned on the spot. The most infuriating thing was that when she sent a message to her father happily replied with 2 lines of words, Congratulations, my daughter. His Majesty has finally done something serious and settled my daughter's marriage. I can also continue to guard the border with peace of mind. Third young Master Fu blinked and reached out to grab the tail of her whip. The fiery red whip immediately straightened. What are you doing? It's only been an hour and you want to kill your husband. Who is my husband? And Wushuang stuttered, her face red with anger. You. Shameless. What's there to be shameless about? Third young Master Fu pulled the whip and instantly pulled his wife from one end to the other. He reached out to hug her skillfully. And Wushuang kicked him in anger. Let go. Ha, I'll let go if you win. Shameless. Who's the shameless one? Could it be that you've forgotten that when we first met, the moment you jumped into my carriage, you stretched out your hand to tease me? You. Princess Wushuang was so angry that she was speechless. She glanced and saw several men and women with ugly expressions walking out of General Wooding's residence. The Marquis of Marquis Ning's residence and the second Madame Bao, were all present. Their expressions were ugly. Luckily, General Wooding's residence occupied a large area. The entrance was an empty piece of land. Other than the general's residence, there were no other residences nearby. Thus, the group of people made a ruckus at the entrance and did not attract much attention from outside the alley. Cousin. When Miss Bao saw third young Master Fu, she did not dare to call him husband so shamelessly in front of him. She looked at him plaintively, but he didn't even look at her. He only took the whip from his wife and rolled it up before throwing it into his inner world. Princess Wushuang was so angry that she struggled in his arms for a while, but she couldn't get out. She wanted to bite him to death. What are you trying to do? I haven't seen my wife for a long time. I want to give her a hug to relieve my longing. Third young Master Fu blinked and looked at her with an aggrieved expression. He mumbled, Shuang, I am injured. And Wushuang was slightly shocked. She quickly looked at him and asked subconsciously, where are you hurt? With this fellow's cultivation, he shouldn't have been captured by a few corpse puppets, right? Here. Third young Master Fu teased his wife as if no one else was around. He reached out, grabbed her small hand and pressed it against his heart. And Wushuang's pretty face flushed red. She felt that the heart of the person under her was boiling like a fire. She immediately spat at him and said angrily, let go of me. Miss Bao fainted immediately. The maidservant beside her quickly reached out to catch her body and screamed, third young master, Miss Bao fainted. Which day doesn't she faint? Third young Master Fu sneered. Chapter 40-46. I'm not a doctor. You can't possibly give her a diagnosis, right? His tone was cold and indifferent as he said, why aren't you taking her to the medical hall to find a doctor? She probably has some hidden illness that makes her faint so easily. And Wushuang looked speechlessly at this sharp-tongued fellow. She struggled slightly but was unable to break free. Instead, she allowed him to hug her even tighter. You let go. Even Princess Wushuang, a female general who had been in the army for many years, couldn't help but blush. Third Fu's family was standing at the side watching. What was this? Third young Master Fu looked at her with a faint smile. I can let go, but you can't run away again. When did I run away? Ha! Third Fu loosened his embrace and grabbed in Wushuang's small hand. He pulled her into the mansion as if no one else was around. Stop right there. Madame Bao stomped her feet in anger and couldn't help but scream, you're really all grown up now. You don't even need to listen to your parents anymore, do you? Father, women don't understand, but you don't understand either. Third Fu looked at the ashen-faced Marquis Fu in amusement. When we were inside just now, didn't I make myself clear enough? Madame Bao wants to control your son's marriage. She's not qualified. Marquis Fu's face was sullen. San, you're a man. You know that if a girl's reputation is ruined, it'll be hard for her to marry into a good family. The matter between you and Suiping, she can only blame herself. Third Fu sneered and said with a cold expression, or she can blame her own aunt. Nothing has happened yet, but she's already spreading rumors outside and causing a storm in the capital. It's as if I, Third Fu, have already married her. Where did she get the guts to do this? Doesn't she think she's funny? Madame Bao was so angry that her entire body trembled. She was like her niece, her body swaying and almost falling. Madam, don't tell me you want to faint too. Third Fu laughed at the two of them. Unfilial son. Marquis Fu's old face flushed red. Anyway, even if you can't disobey His Majesty's edict and insist on marrying Princess Wushuang, you can't let down your cousin's deep feelings. You must marry your cousin. At the very least, she must be a concubine. Concubine? Wouldn't that be too unfair to my cousin? Third young Master Fu said with a smile. It's good that you know. Madame Bao was furious. She curled her lips and shouted, if you really know your mistake, it's not impossible to make your cousin a co-wife after 3 months of marriage. Ha 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 ha. Third young Master Fu hugged Princess Wushuang's slender waist and laughed wildly. What are you laughing at? Madame Bao flew into a rage out of embarrassment. Madam, don't worry. Your Bao family's status is noble. How can you let Miss Bao be a concubine? Third young Master Fu gave a strange smile. Before I left the palace, I went to the Empress to ask for a decree. I will bestow a marriage between fourth brother and cousin. The two of them will love each other dearly and will be together forever. Oh, counting the time, the Empress's decree should be reaching Marquis Ning's estate soon. Why aren't the two of you going back to receive the decree? It's not good to keep the eunuch delivering the decree waiting for a long time. You. Madame Bao turned pale with fright. She pointed at third young Master Fu and screamed in a trembling voice, You. She immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted on the spot. Arbor looked speechlessly at Mo Lien. Brothers are indeed the same kind of people. What a scam. See you tomorrow. Chapter 40-47. Apparently, this Madame Bao vomited blood again after returning home. Her entire body was slanted on the bed and she couldn't get up at all. During dinner, Caichi vividly recounted the information she heard. Mother really issued a decree for their family. Caichi nodded. It's true. She betrothed fourth young master and Miss Cousin to Marquis Ning Estate's fourth young master. That fourth young master is Madame Bao's biological son. These past 2 years, Madame Bao has been picking all over the place, wanting to find a rich young miss from a wealthy family to match her son. Unexpectedly, Caichi couldn't resist covering her mouth in amusement. Xiao Mu blinked before setting down the ladle and commenting with a nod, that's not bad either. That day at Blue and White Flower Restaurant, fourth young Master Fu and this cousin of his seemed to be in love with each other. But Madame Bao definitely won't be satisfied. Caichi pursed her lips and said with a smile, Madame Bao wholeheartedly wants her son to climb up the social ladder. How could she possibly hope for her son to marry her niece? The Bao family simply doesn't rank high in the imperial capital. In the end, it's just a small family. Who told her to want to trick others? Arbor humphed. In the end, she tricked herself. Since Mother Queen had decreed the marriage, Madame Bao could only swallow her broken teeth and blood. No matter how much she looked down on her niece, she could only let her own son marry someone else. Those who harmed others would end up harming themselves. She completely brought this upon herself. Arbor's hand paused, and she looked up at the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal who had suddenly appeared beside her. The latter smiled at her the moment he came out and tossed a palm-sized stone in his hand. "Jojo, look, we found a sacred meridian on Peak Planet." Arbor's eyes lit up, and she reached out to take the stone from his hand. "Chirp chirp," the little girl called out. The little white squirrel immediately flashed out and reached out two small paws to hold the stone. It peeled off the outer layer of the stone like peeling a banana, revealing a fist-sized pure gold sacred stone inside. A powerful energy wave rapidly circulated within this tiny sacred stone. The little fellow held it in her hand and stared at it without blinking. Looking up at the grinning venerable Peach Blossom Immortal, the little stoic blinked and asked, "It's useful?" "Of course." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal raised his hand and took the holy stone from her. "This small piece of holy stone is enough for me to absorb for about an hour. Then let's mine it." The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal nodded with a smile. When Dao Wuji and the rest saw this holy stone, their eyes lit up. Needless to say, they were naturally willing to do the hard work. Arbor nodded in response. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal said, "That guy isn't back yet." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard Mo Lien's voice from outside the door. "What do you want?" The little stoic ran to the door. When she looked up, she saw Mo Lien striding through the door and reaching out to pull her over. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal rolled his eyes. "Since you're back, let's go." "Where are we going?" Mo Lien and Arbor asked in unison. In a flash, the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal appeared in front of Arbor. "Jojo, have you forgotten? The people from the Pure Heaven sect that we met in the Phoenix Forest. Their stronghold in the Divine Province is located on the outskirts of Dragonflame City." Realization dawned on Arbor and he nodded his small head. Recently, he had been running between the academy and the capital, wholeheartedly searching for Cerberus blood from Murong Sun, so he had forgotten about this important matter. This was indeed an important matter. Chapter 40-48. When he met Mo Lien's slightly puzzled phoenix eyes, Arbor pulled her aside and whispered something to her. He recounted to Mo Lien how he encountered the Clear Sky sect's disciples with the knife-scarred man and his group in Phoenix Woods. When he mentioned how those people besieged her and were ultimately killed by them, Mo Lien's eyes also darkened. The Clear Sky sect's people haven't died out yet. The faction behind the Clear Sky sect resembles Tianyun but also doesn't. Their Clear Sky sect several operations don't seem to have much connection with Tianyun. This Clear Sky sect's favorite thing to do seemed to be besieging and killing the little stoic. She was well aware that the person behind this sect was definitely that old rival who had been plotting against her from the lower star domain to the upper three provinces and from her previous life to this life. "Say, do you think they've all moved away from their base in the capital's suburbs because the assassination mission in Phoenix Woods failed?" The little stoic asked gravely. The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal shook his head and said sarcastically, "I think they'll beat you at your own game and trick you again." The little fellow was smart and understood almost immediately. His eyes narrowed like cold lightning, and his voice was frosty. "Will that be the case?" Mo Lien also nodded slightly. "It should be." The three of them looked at each other with tacit understanding and then nodded, preparing to set out for the capital's suburbs under the cover of the night. The little stoic glanced at the Crown Prince. "Did Royal Father call you to the study because of Third Fu's incident today?" Prince Mo shook his head. "No, something happened with the state preceptor." The little stoic involuntarily pursed her lips. She never had a good impression of this Sir State Preceptor. In reality, although this Sir State Preceptor didn't do anything on the surface, he gave off a strange feeling. He seemed like a friend yet also an enemy, and he was very reserved. The stoic boasted that she was quite intelligent, but she had never understood this person from beginning to end. Mo Lien followed her outside and said helplessly, "This matter is related to you." Arbor raised his eyebrows. "The imperial advisor has been detained by the Sea of Forgetfulness's Long family," Mo Lien said helplessly. "He sent a message to Imperial Father. The Sea of Forgetfulness's Long family wants to see you." Arbor was silent for a while. "We'll see." Mo Lien and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal looked at each other. At the same time, they saw a trace of icy coldness in the little fellow's eyes. Yes, it was indifference. When the Sea of Forgetfulness's Long family was mentioned, the little fellow's heart didn't stir too much. His expression was so indifferent that it made one feel a bit of heartache. "Jojo," Arbor said coldly, "my mother is no longer here. That foolish woman who was willing to sacrifice her happiness for the family is already dead. I'm not her." Her voice was cold and indifferent. At least for now, she wasn't mentally prepared to meet the Long family. What's more, what does the Long family detain the state preceptor have to do with her? Was she and Arbor the kind of girl who would come and go as she pleased? Detain the state preceptor and have her rush over. She would rush over. What a joke. Who was the state preceptor to her? She wasn't the kind of kind-hearted Virgin Mary who would immediately feel compassion for any cat or dog that was in danger. She silently turned around and walked outside. Mo Lien and the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal didn't say anything else and followed her outside. Halfway there, the two of them looked at each other again. Chapter 40-49. It seemed that Jojo harbored some resentment toward the Long family. But it made sense. That family in the Sea of Forgetfulness, for the sake of this illusory promise of 300 years of marriage, they had really ruined their daughter's lifetime happiness. According to Jojo's protective nature, she would definitely not like the Long family too much. Frankly speaking, the reason why he had repeatedly saved those mere people was because he had promised Senior Xuanji that he would take care of those weak mere people. Apart from that, Jojo and the Long family really did not have much of a relationship. The three of them left the Eastern Palace under the cover of night and headed toward the outskirts of the capital. Because they could not confirm the exact location for the time being, they did not use transportation talismans to teleport over. When they arrived near the outskirts of the capital, the Venerable Peach Blossom Immortal pondered for a moment before leading them southwest. It was already late at night. On a small hill in the outskirts of the capital, summer cicadas chirped one after another. Xiao Mu, Mo Lien, and Ji Chen stopped at the entrance to an inconspicuous farmhouse's small courtyard at breakneck speed. "Here." Arbor looked at He Shurchen meaningfully. The latter nodded slightly at her. According to the results of the soul-searching last time, the Clear Sky Sect's stronghold near the outskirts of the capital is here. An ordinary, inconspicuous farmhouse hidden among the large farmhouses in the outskirts of the capital was indeed well hidden. Arbor's fingers moved slightly. She casually sucked a piece of gravel from the ground into her palm and shot it out with a flick of her finger. Buzz. An inverted bowl-shaped defensive barrier appeared above the farmhouse that had been ambushed by an external force. In the sky above the originally quiet farmyard, a few dark figures also appeared. A hint of a smile appeared in He Shurchen's eyes. "You've come quickly. Who are you?" The other party shouted sternly. "Why bother with the pretense?" Arbor said indifferently. "You've been setting up defenses here for more than a day or two. You've been waiting for us for a long time, haven't you?" These people probably did not expect that it would take her so long to find their stronghold after returning to the capital. Ever since she left the Phoenix Forest, she had to run back and forth to the royal school, which took her more than half a month. Such a strange thing shouldn't be within the other party's control. They had probably been waiting for so long that they were getting impatient. The man in black was obviously stunned by Arbor's attitude. It was clear that Arbor and the other two knew that this was a trap, but they still came. How bold. Ren. Arbor turned to look at him. Mo Lien nodded. At the same time, she leaped into the air with Chen. Together, they set up an even sturdier square-shaped defensive barrier around the farmhouse's courtyard. Arbor's lips curled into a sneer. He casually took out 2 divine power beads from his inner world and threw them over without saying a word. Boom! 2 loud sounds rang out. All sound was naturally blocked by the defensive wall. It was still a warm and beautiful night. The nearby farms and cottages did not know that a large-scale battle was taking place here. The men in black who were suddenly attacked by the divine power beads hurriedly scattered in all directions in shock. But it was too late. The divine power beads tore a huge hole in the defensive barrier they had set up. The huge impact seeped in through the hole and sent a few people flying several feet away. Pew. The men in black were injured and vomited blood at the same time. Chapter 40-50. The look in his eyes changed abruptly, and then he turned around and ran toward the inner yard. Naturally, such a small manor wouldn't be too big. Xiaomu waved her hand, and countless sand scorpions blotted out the sky as they swarmed toward this small manor to outflank it. Their movement speed was very fast, so fast that one could only see them clearly. They were black balls. It was as if a black wave had rushed into the courtyard and submerged the backyard in an instant. Ah! 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 From time to time, there were screams of horror coming from the yard. The hundreds of men in black in the inner yard were now surrounded by a large group of black scorpions like caged birds. The archers who were hiding on the rooftops were also in a state of confusion. They had been waiting here for a long time, and did not expect to see a large group of black scorpions. Bang! The giant sand scorpion king appeared in the group of scorpions. The archers were refreshed. They could not deal with the sea of black scorpions below, but at least the giant sand scorpion king could be everyone's target. Didn't they say that to catch bandits, first catch the king? Maybe after they finished off the sand scorpion king, they could make the group of scorpions retreat. Thinking of this, the archers shot arrows at the sand scorpion king below. The arrows were all knocked down by the sand scorpion king's 2 huge iron pincers. The archers were secretly shocked. At this moment, one of them suddenly let out a miserable scream. The leader, who was about to scold the man to shut up, looked back and was almost scared out of his wits. A ball of flame suddenly burst out of the man's chest and enveloped his entire body in an instant. The man screamed in pain, and the flame on his body seemed to spread. Someone was so anxious that without thinking, he was kicked off the roof and fell into the sea of scorpions. In minutes, he was gnawed until not even a bone was left. Everyone was scared out of their wits, and their faces suddenly changed unpredictably. At the same time, strange flames kept coming out of people's bodies, and they were also kicked off the roof and fed to the scorpions. It's mosquitoes. Mosquitoes. One of the men finally noticed the anomaly and screamed out. Under the night sky, mosquitoes that were smaller than fingernails naturally wouldn't catch anyone's attention at first. But when they saw the real strength of the fiery evil mosquitoes, no one dared to underestimate them. This was a group of things that could kill without spilling blood. Watch out for these strange mosquitoes. Just as an archer let out a cry, he saw a ball of fire burrowing out of his chest. Everyone looked at him in horror. Even the vice captain was affected. How strange these mosquitoes were. The archers on the roof were too busy to shoot arrows at the sand scorpion king. There was a large group of sand scorpions below, so they were invincible as they surged towards the black-clothed man like a tide. Anyone who was dragged into the group of sand scorpions, no matter who they were, could not escape the fate of being gnawed into dregs. Xiao Mu's eyes were frosty as she stared at the utterly defeated men in black who were doing their best to slaughter the sand scorpions, and a cold sneer flitted across her eyes. Trap. Did they want to trap her? Ha! In the face of absolute strength, any trap was useless. It would only accelerate their exposure and send them to hell. Arbor's eyes were cold and indifferent. He raised a luminous pearl. Chapter 40-51. The luminous pearl's gentle and warm light instantly illuminated the pitch-black sea of sand scorpions below. It also made the black-clothed men who were struggling against the sand scorpions in a flurry of motion to look over with slightly distorted hands. They saw the little girl hovering in the air above this small farmhouse's courtyard. Her expression was apathetic and aloof as usual, and her pair of bright almond-shaped eyes appeared especially sharp and bright in the night. One of them couldn't resist bellowing at Arbor, "You knew long ago that there was a trap here, you did it on purpose." A vine whip slid in front of that black-clothed man and slapped his face. That person steadied himself with great difficulty and hacked at several sand scorpions around him before attempting to leap into the air again. Damn it! It was this feeling of being controlled again. His entire body felt heavy, as if he was being controlled by someone endlessly, and he couldn't float at all. He wanted to float as he pleased inside the defensive barrier set up by Mo Lian and Ma Shurchin. He was truly incomparably naive. After failing to float, that person panted loudly and sternly said to his black-clothed subordinates, "Don't panic, gather, gather." When he turned his head to look halfway through, his face instantly contorted fiercely. There wasn't a single person around. Other than the black scorpions that blotted out the sky and covered the earth beneath his feet, there wasn't even half a ghost. His subordinates had all died in the swarm of black scorpions. Looking at the spreading scorpions beneath his feet, that person closed his eyes and instantly felt that the situation was hopeless. His long saber fell into the swarm of black scorpions with a bang. His entire body expanded in a split second, and he swiftly charged in Arbor's direction at a terrifying speed. Even if he died, he had to drag someone down with him. Arbor's bone-chilling gaze stared at the person in front of him, and a faint sneer appeared on his lips. "A mantis trying to stop a chariot, how dare you compete with the sun and moon for glory?" The little stoic coldly said this and abruptly drew the thunderclap sword from her conscience. The sword streaked across the sky and slashed horizontally in that person's direction at lightning speed. It was as if a hole had been torn open in the void, and the air in this area twisted slightly. The sky was shattered and the night was silent. The man who was being oppressed by the second move of the Nine Heavens Thunder Sword Art, Thousand Lightning Phantoms, looked at the dark clouds in the sky in horror. He could only watch as the thousands of lightning bolts transformed into sword shadows, carrying traces of the power of thunder and lightning as they swooped down from the sky. Boom! 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 She poured all her emotions into this unlucky guy. Before he could successfully self-destruct, his entire body was crushed to pieces by the thousand lightning phantasm. His entire body dissipated between heaven and earth. Arbor looked coldly at the scene in front of him. He lowered his head to look at the long sword in his hand that was surrounded by lightning. He slowly turned around and looked at the remaining 3 archers on the roof. The latter had long been scared out of his wits. After a few clanking sounds, the 3 of them threw down their weapons and surrendered with pale faces. At the same time, countless rupturing birds flew in front of them and surrounded them. The 3 archers looked at Arbor in horror as if they were looking at the messengers from hell. In a quarter of an hour, only the 3 of them remained out of more than 500 elite disciples of the Clear Sky sect. What kind of terrifying battle prowess was this? Master completely underestimated this little girl in front of them. She actually tamed so many poisonous insects and creatures. It was simply unimaginable. In the current situation, there was simply nowhere to run. They didn't seem to have any other choice other than to obediently surrender. Chapter 40-52. Arbor put away her long sword and hugged the little white squirrel that had jumped into her arms. She slowly walked in front of the three archers and looked at them expressionlessly. What other trump cards do you have? Take them all out at once. They had waited for her for so long in this commoner's little farmhouse courtyard. She didn't believe that these people didn't have a backup plan. Without a backup plan, it didn't seem like a trap set up by her old rival. Once this person made a move, it was very fierce. And after several exchanges, this person should have known long ago that with his abilities, these mere 500 people couldn't do anything to her. He shouldn't have done such a stupid and pointless thing. Mo Lien and Hu Shichen had already searched the entire courtyard. At this time, they came out and shook their heads at her, indicating that they didn't find anything. Two of the archers suddenly howled and were pulled over by a suction force in the air, landing in Hu Shichen and Mo Lien's hands respectively. Arbor looked expressionlessly at the last archer standing in front of her and asked in a cold and calm voice, still not willing to speak. You. What do you want me to say? That person couldn't stop trembling, clearly scared to the point of fainting. His gaze involuntarily drifted towards his two companions. At this time, their souls had already been searched. They sat on the ground like idiots with silly smiles on their faces. With this look, the hairs on this person's body stood on end and he couldn't stop trembling. A soul search was definitely the torture that every cultivator was most unwilling to experience. That person instinctively took a few steps back, his gaze turning from terror to calmness. Immediately after, a faint trace of madness appeared in his eyes. You won't know how Master will deal with you next. His face started to twist crazily. Even if you know how to tame beasts and kill all of us here, you won't be able to escape this inescapable net. Arbor's expressionless appearance seemed to provoke the man in front of her. He shouted harshly, "Why aren't you afraid?" Just now, he had been scared half to death because of those poisonous insects and scorpions. He felt that before he died, if he could see the stoic face in front of him reveal a terrified and uneasy expression, then he would truly be able to die in peace. Arbor's face was cold as he looked at Qinlai and said, "Are you talking about these seal arrays?" Arbor pointed at the crisscrossing confinement rune arrays that suddenly appeared above his head. A hint of mockery flashed in her eyes. "If that's all you have." Arbor glanced at him indifferently. "Then you really can't deal with me." Ha 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 ha. That man suddenly laughed crazily. He took out a jade talisman from his bosom and shouted, "What do you know? This farmhouse is surrounded by our people. We just need to wait for someone to send out the signal. Everyone would perish together." Ha 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 ha. He yelled, then, he looked at the little white squirrel that flew in front of him like lightning and snatched the jade talisman from his hand. It then jumped onto Arbor's shoulder. That person stood dumbfounded in shock. Suddenly, he yelled at the top of his lungs, "Shoot!" When a loud rumble sounded, Arbor raised her hand and created a gust of wind that pulled everyone and all the little beasts into Paradise Planet at an incredible speed. At the same time, the defensive wall that Mo Lien and Qinlai had set up outside suddenly collapsed. Countless divine stones were concentrated here by the bombardment. Chapter 40-53. The skyrocketing tremors alarmed all the residents in the suburbs of the imperial capital. All the farmers in the village were in an uproar. The lights in every house were lit up. People put on their clothes and looked out of the windows. They saw flames soaring into the sky from the southeast. It was like a fire tornado. Smoke filled the air. Hearing the earth-shattering sounds of battle, the villagers were so frightened that they kept quiet out of fear. None of them dared to go out and look. They all shrunk back into their blankets, trembling in fear. Shao Yi led several hundred Night Pavilion disciples and surged out from behind the divine stone cannons. They cut down anyone they saw as if they were chopping vegetables and melons, immediately killing the cannoneers who were caught off guard. There were a total of 12 divine stone cannons, all of which were aimed in the direction of the small farmhouse. After the sound of the cannons, the originally fine farmhouse had been razed to the ground. The people who fired the cannons and the guards totaled more than 300 people. They were all surrounded by the Night Pavilion disciples. Student Shao Yi took the lead and slashed fiercely, directly cutting off one of the arms of one of the cannoneers. With a slap, he slapped him and his weapon to the ground. The Night Pavilion disciples swarmed forward and not only snatched the 12 divine stone cannons, they also chopped down all the black-clothed men who could. The remaining black-clothed men wanted to flee when they saw that the situation wasn't right, but they were also surrounded by a group of armored cavalry. Fong Su rushed over with 5,000 elite Greenwood guards. The crowd spread out and blocked off the black-clothed men's escape route. Without any explanation, they surrounded the Clear Sky sect disciples who were desperately trying to escape. From the beginning of the battle to the end, all the Clear Sky sect disciples were captured and pushed to the center of the encirclement with missing arms and legs. The horses neighed as the red-hot torches were ignited in the whistling night wind. In the pitch-black night, the torches formed a long, continuous dragon that was reflected on the windows of every house. All villagers, listen up. His Highness the Crown Prince is leading the troops to suppress the bandits. Don't be afraid and don't leave your houses for the time being. The bandits have been completely wiped out by us Greenwood guards. You won't be in any danger, Fong Su shouted loudly, his voice reaching all the villages in the suburbs. The commoners, who had been scared half to death, immediately let out a sigh of relief when they heard that the Crown Prince had come to suppress the bandits. Some of the braver ones couldn't help but lean against the window and look out, only to see that under the pitch-black night sky, there was a continuous stream of torches, and the shadows of the crowd were flickering in the wind. When Arbor's figure reappeared in the ruins of the farmhouse, Shao Yi, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately came forward to greet him. Mo Lian also walked over unhurriedly. When he saw the residence that was filled with devastation, his lips hooked up in an extremely cold sneer. No wonder Jojo was so cautious. Her old rival really knew how to set up a series of traps. Her strategy was different from ordinary people. If someone else were here today, they would definitely be killed by the 12 cannons if they were caught like a turtle in a jar in the confinement rune array. Even if he used all his defensive spiritual artifacts to resist, even if he didn't die, he would still be severely injured. Your Highness, our brothers are waiting outside. Shao Yi stepped forward and reported, all the Clear Sky sect disciples present are under control. Very good. Mo Lian nodded lightly and swept her gaze around in satisfaction. At this time, the Clear Sky sect archer in Jian Shichen's hand was already trembling from head to toe. His entire body was covered in blood, and he looked battered and exhausted. Chapter 40-54. Spirit, Spirit, Spirit. A spirit domain. A portable spirit domain. The archer's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. In a moment of desperation, Arbor had dragged him in as well. His other two companions, who had already become idiots, had already been turned into minced meat by the god's stone cannons. This person's expression was terrified. Just by looking at his expression, one could tell how shocked, anxious, and terrified he was right now. This little crown princess actually had a portable spirit domain. No wonder so many god stone cannons had no effect on her at all. No matter how powerful the god stone cannons were, what use were they if they hit an empty target? They were completely useless, okay? The man took a deep breath. His mind spun rapidly as he thought about how to leak this news. Damn it. No wonder Master had schemed to deal with her so many times but had never succeeded. This time, almost all the remaining forces of the Clear Sky sect had been gathered to launch the last fierce attack. However, they still failed. It wasn't that they were too weak, but that the other party was too strong. The other party actually had a portable spirit domain. No wonder she could summon so many sand scorpions and so many poisonous mosquitoes and birds. Don't kill me. I can tell you that Master has another stronghold here. This person trembled all over and hurriedly said. Do you think I will believe you? Arbor looked at him coldly. She was looking at a corpse. Those who knew about the fact that she had a spirit domain with her were all her own people, or dead people who couldn't speak. As soon as he finished speaking, Hu Shichen pressed down on his head without saying a word and searched his soul as usual. Then, with a wave of his finger, countless wooden thorns with barbs pierced into the man's body and twisted him into pieces. Xiao Yi secretly complained about how cruel it was. Lord Celestial Venerable had destroyed the person to the point that not even a trace of blood could be seen. It was truly an elegant and high-end technique. Let's go. Hu Shichen turned around and nodded at the two. She led them out of the ruins and walked directly into the village. Bang! She kicked open a small courtyard door. Zhi Qin strode inside, and Xiao Mu and Nimo Lian followed behind him. Behind them, Xiao Yi and Fang Su also led their people inside noisily. The small courtyard was immediately filled with people. He Chen led the group to a small backyard and pointed at the old willow tree in the corner of the yard. Dig it up. Everyone swung their hoes with a series of banging sounds. A secret passageway appeared under the tree. Yuan Shichen sighed and turned to Arbor. It's best not to have too much hope. This enemy is very smart. It seems that there won't be anyone too stupid among his subordinates. This place is surrounded by our men. The other party should have guessed that their whereabouts would be exposed tonight. Since he can't escape, he will probably, once I die, I'll end my life with my secrets. As soon as Shichen finished speaking, everyone rushed into the cellar in front of them and saw a lifeless woman lying on the edge of a wooden table. Arbor curled his lips and revealed a strange expression. He walked forward and grabbed the woman's hair to make her look up. There were countless poisonous insects on the old woman's face. Her nose, eyes, and mouth had been completely gnawed away by the poisonous insects. She looked extremely disgusting and terrifying. You are indeed not an ordinary person to be so ruthless to yourself. Arbor said coldly without changing his expression. A soul-summoning talisman lit up on his fingertips. His eyes were deep and cold. Is death useful? Chapter 40-55. As expected, this woman was extremely scheming. She knew that if those Clear Sky sect disciples were captured, one of them would definitely be forced to search their soul and expose her origins. At this time, the Crown Prince's troops had already surrounded the outside. If she rushed out, she would only expose her own identity. Thus, this woman went all out and swallowed poisonous insects and poisons, allowing these things to ruin her entire face. As a result, it was naturally impossible for others to easily recognize her identity. However, she didn't expect that in this world, there was a kind of almighty talisman master who could communicate with the power of heaven and earth and casually capture half of a person's soul after death. Of course, this method was very bad, because if an ordinary person died, their soul would definitely dissipate within 7 days. If her soul was forcefully extracted, it would definitely suffer the torment of being fried in boiling oil. After that, she would have to suffer the pain of her soul not dissipating for several days. The torment and pain of the soul was definitely not something a person's physical body could experience. Arbor wouldn't easily use this kind of talisman. However, this woman in front of her had a great enmity with her, so she couldn't be bothered to care whether she was dead or alive, whether she was in pain or suffering. The young crown princess raised a jade slip with her fingertips. With a flicker of light, a streak of light burrowed into the woman's blackened body. In a flash, an indistinct figure with an indistinct appearance floated up from the old woman's blackened body. At first, it was enveloped by a light barrier and looked around in confusion. When it saw Arbor and the other two standing in front of it, the soul involuntarily retreated. Arbor looked at her indistinct figure with an incomparably cold gaze and asked in a low voice, "Speak. Who are you, and who is your master?" As soon as she finished speaking, a cluster of ice crystals suddenly jumped out of her fingers and turned into long ice needles. Arbor flipped her hand and pointed the needles at the woman's soul, emitting a faint silver light. Without waiting for the soul to speak, she flicked her finger, and dozens of long needles shot out with a whoosh. Ding, 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 ding. The long needles pierced through the body of the soul and directly nailed the dozen or so soft snakes that had crawled down the walls of the cellar to the ground. "How dare you show off your petty tricks in front of this crown princess?" Arbor coldly glanced at the woman's soul and raised another piece of jade. "Normal practitioners are ineffective against soul attacks, but that doesn't mean I can't do anything to you," Arbor said coldly. "If you don't answer me properly, I will keep your soul body captive and make you suffer the pain of thousands of arrows piercing your heart and lightning strikes for the rest of your life. Don't worry. As long as I want to, I can preserve your soul forever without any problems." Mo Lien and Yuan Shichin could clearly see that the woman's soul trembled a few times as if she had received a shock. Of course, she was afraid. He felt an enormous fear towards the dark future. "Now, I'll let you suffer." Arbor waved his hand coldly. The talisman transformed into the power of thousands of arrows that pierced through the soul body's limbs and bones. Prince Mo and the venerable Peach Blossom Immortal really didn't expect that a soul body could let out such a tearing scream. The woman's originally indistinct figure flickered slightly like a candle flame. Her entire body curled up into a ball in pain and fell to the ground, holding her head and trembling. Chapter 4056. Arbor raised another talisman jade slip and coldly looked at the woman in front of him without any emotion in his eyes. That extremely cold gaze fell into the eyes of a soul body. It was so cold that it was like a ghost that had walked out of hell. This little stoic girl was simply more like a ghost than a ghost. The soul trembled and watched as she raised her finger, seemingly about to activate another talisman attack. The woman shrieked in terror, "Talisman Master! Great Talisman Master!" Did Master know what kind of existence she had been chasing after all these years? "You're right." Arbor looked at her indifferently and unhurriedly nodded. "I am indeed a great Talisman Master. I can make your soul beg for death." The woman trembled in terror and buried her head in her body. She curled up and raised her hands, swaying repeatedly. Don't attack me, don't." Arbor's fingertip moved, and amidst the woman's shriek, a beam of talisman power passed through her body. The woman, who originally thought she would suffer the sin of having her heart pierced by 10,000 arrows, suddenly felt as if her entire body was warm, as if she was basking in the faint sunlight she hadn't seen in a long time. After the talisman power of the restoration talisman was injected, the transparent soul's pained expression receded slightly, and she felt a bit better. "Don't worry," Arbor said coldly, "I said I wouldn't let you die like this." Another jade talisman appeared in her hand, and the power of a lightning talisman could faintly be seen slowly moving within. Lightning guiding talisman. The old woman's body contorted, and she hastily knelt down and kowtowed. Spare me, spare me. Spare me, Crown Princess, spare me. Who are you? Arbor asked with a chilly expression. I am Madame Long's personal servant, the old woman said while trembling. Xiao Xiao's surname is Wang. Everyone calls me Mammy Wang. Which Madame Long? Yes, Madame Long Shoshin of the imperial capital's Long family's branch family. Arbor looked at her expressionlessly. After a while, he suddenly flung the lightning strike talisman in his hand, which attracted a bolt of heavenly lightning that exploded on the old woman's left hand. Ah! The sizzling power of the thunder curse spread through her soul. It was so painful that she almost doubted her life. It was too painful. It was really too painful. That kind of painful feeling was really indescribable. Arbor glanced at her and continued, Are you still unwilling to tell the truth? If the dictum talisman could be used on souls as well, it wouldn't be so troublesome now. Mo Lien walked to her side and took her little hand. She glanced at the woman indifferently. Do you think it's fine to push all the blame onto the Long family? The branch of the Long family can be considered to have escaped from the divine prefecture, but if we really want to capture them, it won't be that troublesome. It was just that there was no need for that at the moment. The soul trembled again, and then said in a weak voice, I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. I'm begging the Crown Princess to give me a quick death. I only know that the person who has been contacting me is an old nanny surnamed Zhang. She really is the old nanny by Madame Long's side. If you don't believe me, you can check it out. Her surname is Zhang, and her name is Zhang Huilan. You're very generous. You gave me spirit coins to do something. The woman with the surname Wang screamed when she saw Arbor raise his hand. Chapter 40-57. He curled up on the ground and kowtowed repeatedly. The woman hurriedly poured out everything she knew like beans from a bamboo tube. It's really Your Highness the Crown Prince, Crown Princess. This old servant is telling the truth. She hurriedly said, while ago, this Granny Zhang even came to find me and gave me a large sum of money to do something at the Kaidai Pavilion. Arbor's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at her coldly. Speak clearly. Yes. The old woman hurriedly explained everything from beginning to end. It turned out that it was this old woman who had worn the Zhang Fua mask, disguised as a man, and instigated the Zhang family to carry their second son's corpse to the Kaidai Pavilion to cause trouble. Arbor sneered. Then you were also the one who poisoned the 8 members of the Zhang family to death in prison. The old woman immediately shook her head in fright. No, Crown Princess, this old servant didn't do it. This old servant only accepted Zhang Huilan's mission and went to find the Zhang family's old madam. I told them about this matter and gave them a sum of money. Apart from that, this old servant really didn't do anything. It's true, it's absolutely true. The old woman knelt and begged for mercy, kowtowing repeatedly. Arbor's cold gaze swept over her, and he didn't speak for a long time. A faint trace of disappointment flitted through her eyes, and she asked in a low voice, How do you usually communicate with Zhang Huilan? I have a jade talisman for communication. It's buried in that crack in the wall. Where is that Zhang Huilan right now? She followed the Long family and ran away, the woman said shakily. In other words, no one can prove whether what you're saying right now is true or false. Qiao Mu sneered, throwing her a gaze that was as chilly as a snowy soul. What I've said, every word of it it's true. Little Grandaunt, I don't dare to lie to you. As he spoke, a shadow flashed at the entrance of the cellar. Stay up late and a few night pavilion disciples walked over, each carrying a person. Everyone bowed toward Mo Lien and Xiao Mu in greeting. Yi said with a chuckle, Crown Prince Consort, we've captured them. As soon as they finished speaking, a few trembling figures were thrown to the ground by their hands. They fell to the ground in front of the little crown princess. The woman's shadow, which was originally huddled together, suddenly stood up. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws, and was about to charge forward. But in an instant, she was frozen in place by a body-securing talisman. Spare my life, spare my life. 4 or 5 people were crawling on the ground. They were in a sorry state and were only wearing underwear. It was obvious that these people had been dragged out of their beds and brought here. There were men and women, young men and women, as well as 13 or 14-year-old boys and girls trembling in fear. Granny Wang, the Crown Princess, saw that you were lonely on the road to the Yellow Springs, so I brought your family here. Arbor's eyes were cold, and his voice was indifferent. How about I send your family to the Yellow Springs to accompany you? No, no. No. The Wang woman finally knew fear. Her entire shadow trembled like a sieve, and she couldn't stop shaking. No, Crown Princess, you can't do this. Why can't I do it? The little Crown Princess coldly interrupted her. Humph, you smelly bugs. Every day, you think of ways to make my life difficult. Now you know fear. Chapter 40-58. Ha! The little stoic's voice was extremely bleak and apathetic. How about I let you all have a taste of drifting in the void for several hundred years? She raised a blue flame in her hand and aimed it at the people kneeling on the ground. She berated harshly, if you don't speak, then all of you can die. No, don't. Madame Wang let out a high-pitched shriek. This old servant is willing to speak. Willing to speak. Willing to say anything. I beseech the Crown Princess to be magnanimous and let off my family's juniors. Arbor's apathetic gaze turned towards her. That Zhang Huilan, I know. I know. She didn't escape with the Long clan. Instead, she was taken to a big aristocratic family. Although they did these things behind my back, I still discovered some clues. That Zhang Huilan is in contact with the Mu family. The Mu family. Yes, it's that talisman patrician family, the Mu family. Arbor's eyes narrowed slightly. After circling back and forth for so long, why did it circle back to the Mu family? Every word I said is the truth. I dare to swear, I dare to swear on my soul that if I deceive the Crown Princess even half a sentence, I will be struck by lightning and have my soul scattered. I won't even be able to be a pig, a cow, or a lamb in my next life. As expected, it was a very vicious oath. Arbor swept her a cold glance and said with a nod, remember what you said today. After saying this, he stored this soul into a storage talisman with a wave of his hand. Arbor glanced coldly at the men and women pretending to be quails on the ground and walked out without a word. Let them go after we verify whether her words are true or false. Aoyi waved his hand, and someone escorted the wailing men and women away. This old ghost was very crafty. Even at this time, she still wanted to swear loyalty to her master. Unfortunately, as long as the night pavilion targeted someone, it was impossible to not know their identity and background. Is she telling the truth? The venerable Peach Blossom Immortal turned to look at Mo Lien and asked. It's half true and half false. Prince Mo sighed. Oh. At this juncture, she still dares to not tell the truth. That old scoundrel definitely knows more than just this. Jojo is still too soft-hearted. A cold light flashed in Mo Lien's eyes, and her sight fell on the storage amulet that contained Wang Mama. The storage talisman trembled, and his father's extremely faint figure immediately fell down. Trembling, he knelt on the ground. Before Mo Lien could say anything, she kowtowed and said, "Your Highness, this old servant is speaking the truth." This old servant has already. Mo Lien waved her hand, and Stay Up Late came in with a tray. There were 2 bloody fingers on it. Ah! The old woman's face, which was like an afterimage, twisted with all her might. "It's just 2 fingers now." Mo Lien curled her lips mockingly. "Perhaps in less than a quarter of an hour, it will be an arm or an eyeball. You're very good. You fooled my Jojo." Mo Lien looked at her indifferently and said, "You know that the crown princess won't really do anything to your family. You've figured out her personality very well. Yes, the crown princess won't take her anger out on your family." Mo Lien smiled and nodded at her. She inched closer to the old woman and said in an extremely faint voice, "I will. My babies, my mother fell and fractured her bones. I've been accompanying her in bed since last night. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.